that's a pretty good bet. If you say, do you think Gary Anderson will make this field goal? The answer should probably be yes.
39 yards away, and it's not good.
This is the most heartbreaking NFL team of all time. No, not just the 98 Vikings, but the entire Vikings franchise. Don't get me wrong, they are not a bad organization. In fact, quite the opposite. They are top 5 in playoff appearances since the 1970 merger. They have the highest winning percentage of any team not to win a Super Bowl. They have had one of the best teams ever to not win a Super Bowl, and maybe the best team ever to not make a Super Bowl. Twice, they have had the best kicker in the league just to see their season come to an end because that kicker missed. To have your heart broken, you need to have hope, and this team has given their fans more hope than any other team. And they have broken their fans' hearts more than any other team. This is why many believe the Vikings are cursed. But why? Why are they cursed to be so heartbreaking? Well, there was a very good theory on why, but it was disproven back in 2015, and since then no one seems to know why this team is so cursed. Until now. Join us as we go through their history to find the origins of this curse in all the times it has plagued the Vikings, and how it has changed over time, so much so, you might think they've been cursed twice. This is The Curse of the Vikings, a history of heartbreaking success.
Sports are history.
I'm Sam, Sports Our History. This is my good friend Matt, who is a NFL aficionado. You're going to be proxy for the audience, so if you got any questions, if I say anything that sounds confusing or dumb or needs clarification, let me know.
I got you.
And we'll go in. Okay, we're going to start with where people thought the original curse came from. So, the Vikings were the last team to win the old NFL championship back in 1969. The next year, in 1970, the NFL and AFL would merge to form what we now see as the modern NFL, right? The old NFL, that essentially became the NFC conference, and the NFL championship game would essentially become the NFC championship game, right? But before that 1970 merger, it was still the NFL championship game, and the Vikings were the last team to win it. And when you win a championship, you get a trophy. And for that old NFL championship game, the trophy was the Ed Thorpe Memorial Trophy. A trophy that would go missing for 45 years. Since the Vikings were the last ones to win it, they must have been the ones to lose it. And losing that trophy cursed them. See, immediately after they won it, and I guess also then misplaced it, they would lose Super Bowl IV, which they were heavily favored in, and this would start a span of losing 4 Super Bowls in 8 years.
Really glad they lost that Super.
That's a different story. So the theory, it was a pretty good one. You lost the Ed Thorpe Memorial Trophy, and now you are cursed to never do better. But it turned out there was a big problem with this theory. You see, the Ed Thorpe Memorial Trophy, it reappeared in 2015, but it wasn't the Vikings who had it. It was their arch rival, the Green Bay Packers. The trophy was found buried away somewhere in the Packers Hall of Fame. Yes. Which means, the Vikings never actually received the trophy in 1969, and neither did the team that won it the year before them in 1968, the Baltimore Colts. The Packers had won the trophy in 1967 and 66, and I guess they just never gave it back. You would think the Colts and Vikings might want the trophy they just won, but, by this time we also had the Super Bowl, which came around in 66, and it was now the grand prize in American pro football, not the NFL championship, so maybe the Vikings and Colts just didn't care? But if the Vikings never had the trophy and therefore never lost the trophy, why are they cursed? For a curse as bad as the Vikings, we must go back to the very creation of the team itself, before they even decided on the name the Vikings. And heck, we'll even go back like a year before that. In 1958, we would have what's known as the greatest game ever played. It was the 1958 NFL championship game between the New York Football Giants and the Baltimore Colts, and a great game it was. It's often seen as the genesis for football becoming so popular in America, or at least the NFL anyways. After this game, many wealthy individuals were wanting to buy their own NFL team. But the NFL was afraid to oversaturate the market and did not want to expand past the 12 teams it had. In 1959, one of the wealthy individuals the NFL turned down, Lamar Hunt, decided to get together with some of the other wealthy individuals the NFL had also turned down and form their own American Football League. And hell, that's what they called it, the American Football League. The market they would go after was the middle of the country because the NFL had no presence in the middle of the country at this time. They had their eyes set on two major cities to help lock down this market: Dallas, Lamar's hometown in the south, and Minneapolis in the north. Max Winter, a wealthy businessman in Minneapolis, had also been one of those individuals that the NFL turned down. So when he was given a chance to own his own football team in this new league, the AFL, he happily joined. He would get his business partner, Bill Boyer, to join him in owning the team, along with H.P. Skoglund, another wealthy businessman in the area. And man, it would have been cool if his name was Skoglund, right?
That really would have been a lot cooler. I mean, it would make more sense of that.
Dude, you just gotta drop that G that he had in his name, and you would have had it.
God, so close.
Skoglund. I know, dude. It's, you know. Anyways, Minneapolis became such an important location that when the owners of the eight new AFL teams came together, they decided that Minneapolis would be the site for the very first AFL draft, right? And Minneapolis would go on to host the very first AFL draft, which might be confusing to those that know their history because there was never an AFL team in Minnesota. Yeah, okay, see.
Great city, though.
It's great city.
Great city.
I went there once in January, and it's great city, but holy crap, that's a different kind of cold.
I don't want to be there in January.
It's a different kind of cold. All right. So these AFL owners, they had more money than the owners of the NFL teams, which meant they could provide some real competition for the NFL, and the NFL did not like this, right? So the NFL now became very open to the idea of expanding the league and trying to kill the AFL before it could even get started. Their first idea to achieve this was to just buy out the AFL, or at least half of it anyways. They approached Lamar Hunt with an offer to let 4 of these would-be AFL teams join the NFL, including Lamar's team in Dallas and that team up in Minnesota. But Lamar, having made a deal with 8 owners or owner groups, and not just 4, turned down the offer. He was not going to leave those 4 other teams high and dry. Lamar knew that the next approach the NFL would take would be to poach the other teams individually, the ones they want to go after. So Lamar got together with the other AFL owners, and they all agreed not to take any offers from the NFL, knowing that even one team leaving, it could create a domino effect and end up just killing the AFL. The NFL would, of course, try this approach. They offered Bud Adams, the owner of the Houston team, or the would-be owner of the Houston team, to come over to the NFL. Bud Adams turned down this offer, and he was quoted as saying, "I am a man of my word." Yes, when asked why he turned it down.
That's right.
That's right. The NFL even offered the LA owner, Baron Hilton, yes, that Hilton, yes.
Yeah, okay.
They offered him 50% of the Rams. His 50%, and he turned it down. You fast forward to the eve of the very first AFL draft, right? Night before, the AFL owners were convening in a Minneapolis hotel room preparing for the draft when the owner of the New York franchise, Harry Weismer, came storming into the room with a local newspaper that read, "Minnesota to get an NFL franchise." And this is how the rest of the AFL owners learned that Max Winter, Bill Boyer, and minority owner H.P. Skoglund had turned their back on the AFL and accepted an offer from the NFL. This was a huge blow to the new league, one that almost ended it in its infancy. Not only did the NFL take what was supposed to be a keystone market from the AFL, it did so the night before they were supposed to hold their very first draft, the first real public event as a league. And they did so in the city that was hosting the draft. Yes, this backstabbing to an entire league, one where many of the owners had turned down the very offer Minnesota was now accepting from the NFL, is not only where the history of the Minnesota Vikings begins in the NFL, it is where the curse of the Minnesota Vikings was born.
Rightfully so.
Right.
Rightfully so.
They stabbed the entire AFL in the back, right? So I believe that cursed them to never have ultimate success against the AFL, which should be fine since they were now in the NFL.
Yeah.
Right, should be great. But the AFL would eventually join the NFL and they would merge,
That pesky merger.
That pesky merger, right?
They were so close to getting away with it if it wasn't for that pesky merger there.
In 1966, the NFL and AFL decided to have the champions of each other's leagues play a game against each other to see who the ultimate champion in pro football was. And this game would later be known as the Super Bowl, right? The leagues then planned to merge into one league 4 years down the road in 1970. What was the AFL would become the AFC Conference, and what was that old NFL would now be the NFC Conference, right? Now, I did say the Vikings would never have ultimate success against the AFL/AFC, so we could just call this maybe a Super Bowl curse, especially seeing as the Vikings actually have a winning record all time against the AFC. But that's just really fitting irony for the Vikings.
Really good.
The theme with their curse, with both the curses, is that anything that should be great for the Vikings just makes it that much more heartbreaking in the end. They are not cursed to be a bad team. They are cursed to be a heartbreaking team. And to have heartbreak, you need the hope that a good team provides. Right?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise...
When the Royals lose 100 games in a season, I'm not heartbroken. A little disappointed, sad, but we've seen it so many times. Not heartbroken, right? It's when your team's supposed to be good, and then they lose that.
What separates the Vikings from the Browns?
Expectations. Exactly.
So,
Expectations, that's right.
There's none of that in Cleveland.
None. Yes, the Browns, they are definitely a sadder team. Now, we're a long way from getting to their second curse, but the specific theme for their first curse is not only will they never win a Super Bowl, but they will never get close to winning the Super Bowls they do make it to. So yeah, call it a Super Bowl curse if you'd like, but also, who coined the term Super Bowl? Lamar Hunt.
When you're right, you're right.
They backstabbed his league, Not just him, it was the whole league, but
it was his league.
Right? Before we get into the start of the Vikings' real history, right, as an actual team, let's do some cleanup here. The AFL would still proceed with the draft in Minneapolis and even drafted players to the Minnesota team, not knowing what city or state they would be playing for. Do you know who that team became?
I do not.
That team became the Oakland Raiders, which is poetic. It is poetic that
that's a good one.
The most historic rival to Lamar Hunt's team, the Chiefs, it ended up being created from a backstabbing to his league. His league was backstabbed, and it created his biggest rival. That's the poetry there is just not lost on me, right? It's great. All right, back to the Vikings. The first season for the Vikings in the NFL was 1961. Their first coach would be Norm Van Brocklin. Do you know who Norm Van Brocklin is?
The name sounds familiar.
You should.
Yeah.
Especially you know what? I appreciate that you dressed for the occasion. We're talking about a cursed team, and he wore a hat for a cursed Super Bowl. Look at that. What a cursed ass Super Bowl. Fucking hate it. To clarify, my friend here is a lifelong Eagles and Chiefs fan. I know it's weird. It sounds weird. He had a very easy or difficult time through a couple of Super Bowls recently, not knowing one of your teams won though, and he gets to celebrate no matter what. Don't feel sorry for him.
The lead up was better than the squeeze.
Norm Van Brocklin, he was just retiring from his NFL career as a quarterback, right? A Hall of Fame quarterback. 1960 was his very last year in the league, where he went out as on top as you can be. He would win an NFL championship and league MVP with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Go Birds.
Go Birds, yeah. It was his second NFL championship, but not with his first one he won with the Rams in 51. But it was his first MVP, and he won that. Yeah. So he would become the very first coach for the Vikings. In the Vikings' first NFL draft, they would take quarterback Fran Tarkenton in the third round. Now, while their first game ever went pretty dang well, they beat the Chicago Bears 37-13, with Tarkenton coming off the bench to throw 4 TDs. The rest of the season didn't go so well. They only won 2 more games after that. But expansion teams are never good at first. They're expansion team. Yeah. The Vikings wouldn't have their first winning season until 1964, and that success wouldn't carry over. They would replace Norm Van Brocklin in 1967. So after his last season was in 1966. Yeah. And for the 1967 season, they would hire Bud Grant. Now, Grant had come from the Canadian Football League, where he had won 4 championships in 10 years with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Right? This would make him a Hall of Famer in the Canadian Football League, and spoilers, he would go on to be a Hall of Fame coach in the NFL. And he's still the greatest coach in Vikings history.
Good work, guys.
Yeah.
Good work.
You know what else they did in 1967? With their very first pick of the draft? They would select the greatest Vikings player of all time. Yeah, greatest coach in their history and greatest player in their history, both acquired in the same offseason, 1967. They drafted defensive tackle Alan Page. He would go on to be a 5-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, the first defensive player and still one of only 2 defensive players ever to win NFL MVP. He would go into the Vikings Ring of Honor, where he had his number retired, and also be inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, where Allen grew up and as a teenager worked construction to help build the NFL Hall of Fame. I know, and then he'd be inducted into that building.
That's awesome.
Right? Allen would head up one of the most fearsome defensive lines the league has ever seen, the Purple People Eaters, who, along with Page, would consist of 5-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler, in the Vikings Ring of Honor, and in the NFL Hall of Fame, Carl Eller. Next would be Jim Marshall, their other defensive end, who is a 3-time second-team All-Pro, 2-time Pro Bowler. He's also in the Vikings Ring of Honor with his number retired. Jim Marshall, though, is not in the NFL Hall of Fame, but he was number 2 in NFL Films' top 10 players not in the Hall of Fame. So he's very close. I mean,
I mean, he's...
Jim Marshall also once recovered a fumble and ran it back 65 yards for a safety. He ran the wrong way. Here, check it out.
That's probably why. I mean, I agree now.
Like the time in 1964, when the Vikings' Jim Marshall ran 65 yards with a recovered fumble the wrong way.
You know, it's one of those, I've seen this before, and I'm just still like,
Stop, please.
You still got, oh my God, if he would have done that, he had time to turn it around.
Yeah.
And not think that.
Yeah. Now, this was, in fairness, I believe this was his rookie season. And, you know, he turned out into a pretty great player.
Yeah.
Last, for these Purple People Eaters, you have defensive tackle Gary Larson. No, not the Far Side creator, but the football player who would also go to 2 Pro Bowls himself. He would be replaced as the starter by Doug Sutherland in 1974. But for the most part, you think Gary Larson with the Purple People Eaters. In 1969, all 4 of them would be selected to the Pro Bowl. That's right. An entire defensive line selected to the Pro Bowl. None of them were alternatives or alternates.
That's got to be like the one and only time, right? That whole defensive line from one
I think so. Was yes.
elected to the Pro Bowl. I mean, like...
Now, to be in 1969, I think there were like 16 teams in the league by that time, but still incredible. Incredible. Yes. Back when making the Pro Bowl actually meant something.
Yeah, now it's get rid of it.
All right. But to that 67 season, where the Vikings, they still weren't very good that first year with Allen and new head coach Bud Grant, only winning 3 games. But everything would change the next season in 1968. In 68, they would go 8-6, but this was still good enough for them to win their first division title and for their very first playoff berth. They would lose their first ever playoff game, but this was the start of or perhaps the golden era of the Vikings, right? In the 13 seasons, from 1968 to 1980, they would win 11 division titles. And in there, they would go to 4 Super Bowls in 8 seasons, including back-to-back appearances in Super Bowl 8 and 9. Bud Grant was their head coach through all of this, and the driving force of their team was that defensive line, the Purple People Eaters. So let's get to that 1969 season in what I would consider the greatest season for the Minnesota Vikings. We'll spend a little extra time on the 1969 season. It's somewhat of a microcosm for this great yet heartbreaking era for the Vikings. In 2006, when the NFL Films, they made a documentary miniseries called The Missing Rings, right? Where they ranked the best team of all times not to win a Super Bowl. Yeah. They ranked this Vikings team, the 69 Vikings, as being the second best team in NFL history not to win a ring. There's another Vikings team on that list, too, of the top 5. Yeah.
Wow. 2 in the top 5?
2 in the top 5. That's how heartbreaking the Minnesota Vikings are.
What year was this documentary, you said? F6?
06.
Oh,
So
they just missed. They probably fell to 3rd.
They
probably fell to 3rd.
Well, they
Shortly.
might not be top 5. Yeah,
Yeah, you know what I mean.
I do. Yes, yeah. Obviously, the Patriots 07 team snuck in.
Oh, they just missed it. They just missed it.
This is okay. Let's see how good this 1969 Minnesota Vikings team is, right? Okay, well, they would have the best offense and defense in the league that year. The offense would lead the league in points and score 50-plus points in 3 games. This is still tied for the most 50-plus point games in a single season by any team, right? Yeah, and
we're talking about a team in 1969.
Yeah, and there were 14 games, not 17 they have now.
That's a team.
Yes. I know, yeah, you look at the other teams that did it, was like the 2013 Broncos and
like you're going to think 2000s.
Some great offenses that have done that. All right. The Vikings have currently not scored 50 or more in a game since 1998. Another tragic season we're going to talk about. But a long way.
That totally checks.
The longest current drought for any team not scoring 50 plus is the Cardinals, who haven't done it since 1963. And I'm going to give you one guess who they did it to.
The Vikings.
It was the Vikings.
It had to have been the Vikings. There's only one.
Yeah. So all this to say, the Vikings offense this year was very good, but their defense was even better. The defense would allow the fewest points, yards, and first down in the league that year. They would be second in takeaways, they would have 2 shutouts, and are still second all-time in NFL history for fewest points allowed per game at 9.5. They did give up 24 points in week 1, but they wouldn't allow more than 14 the rest of the regular season. So they lost their first game of the season, but then they won 12 straight, the longest winning streak the league had seen in 35 years at that point, and only lost their last game of the year because they had the 1 seed locked up for the playoffs and rested their starters. Right?
Smart.
Yes. They were not just the best team in the NFL that year. They were one of the best the league had ever seen. Had they won that first game, they might have gone undefeated in the regular season, and they got so close to winning that first game. They would lose that first game by 1 point to the Giants by squandering a 13-point fourth quarter lead. The Giants quarterback would throw 2 touchdowns in that fourth quarter to give them the 14 points that they needed to win. And that Giants quarterback that year would be Fran Tarkenton. Yeah, see, I forgot to mention something else the Vikings did leading up to that 1967 season before they drafted Alan Page and days before they hired Bud Grant. They would trade quarterback Fran Tarkenton to the Giants. Tarkenton and their old coach, Norm Van Brocklin, didn't get along too well, so instead of deciding which one to keep, the Vikings got rid of both of them. I guess. Anyways. Now, had they kept Tarkington, maybe they would have gone undefeated that year, right? At least in the regular season.
Yeah.
And yeah, they would eventually trade back for Fran Tarkington in 72. But we're not there yet. Their starting quarterback that year in 1969 would actually go undefeated against the NFL that season. Their starting quarterback was one Joe Kapp. Kapp joined the Vikings in 1967, also coming from the Canadian Football League, where he had a Hall of Fame career. Now, I've already done a short form video on Kapp going undefeated in 1969. I'm going to do even a longer video on because the dude is a real badass that who needs to be talked about more. And as a quarterback, we just don't ever bring up because he wasn't in the league too long, right?
Yeah.
Like 3 years, 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So I'll try to keep it to a minimum here on talking about him, but we'll have to mention him some. Now, Kapp would be injured for the first game, right? That they lost that year. But then, go on that 12-game winning streak where they locked up the 1 seed and then rested their starters, including Kapp.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he wasn't there for their loss first game or last game of the year.
Eat that, Ben Roethlisberger.
That's right. They then won their... Ben Roethlisberger?
Yeah, that one loss. Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Vikings then won their first playoff games that year against the Rams, which sent them to the very last NFL championship game where they would face the Browns. And to give you a little taste of what a badass Joe Kapp was, he was a mobile quarterback who did not have the word slide in his vocabulary. I'm going to show you a video of him colliding with Browns' 240-pound linebacker Jim Houston.
Minnesota victory belonged to number 11, Joe Kapp, who himself ran for a total of 57 yards, the hard way.
Dude drops like he's shot in the back, and he has to be helped off the field. My voice even cracked a little. It's so incredible.
That is wild. I love that.
Kapp was quite the quarterback. Didn't use the laces to throw. The Vikings would win that game very handedly, 27-7, and be the 1969 NFL champions. They only lost 2 games that year against the NFL, and Joe Kapp played neither. Had it been 4 seasons earlier in 1965, the NFL championship would have been the pinnacle of professional football. But as mentioned, the Super Bowl was introduced in 1966. So the Vikings would have to face the champions of the AFL in the Super Bowl, now being the pinnacle of pro football. Right. But most didn't see the AFL as being quite ready to compete with the NFL yet, and because the Vikings were not just the best team in the NFL that year, but one of the best the NFL had ever seen, they were 12-point favorites going into Super Bowl IV. Now, we'll get into the first time the Vikings curse shows itself. I mean, is it just a coincidence they would be facing the founder of the AFL's own team, the Chiefs? In their first one? Like, I'm a biased Chiefs fan, I get it, but I'm just bringing up the facts.
It's just the perfect,
the whole Vikings history makes sense.
They just totally deserve this.
Painful irony. Is heartbreaking irony. I guess they deserve this a little. I don't think they've deserved all the heartbreak.
But I'm just saying, this one in particular feels earned and deserved.
Yes. I'm a fan of the Vikings. I like the Vikings. I wouldn't have made this whole thing if I wasn't. I'm fascinated by this team.
Yeah, obviously.
And their heartbreak.
There's definitely been points in my life where I've enjoyed watching the Vikings teams. They've had some very entertaining teams.
They have.
So I totally get
throughout their whole history.
And especially our childhood, there's reasons why I know you like the Vikings.
I like the Vikings.
Obviously.
Okay, but let's get into Super Bowl IV and why the Vikings lost it. Which is the curse, of course.
That's totally the reason.
That's the curse.
Okay, next year.
All right, but let's really get into it, as it would be something of a blueprint for their 3 other Super Bowl losses. Hank Stram, the coach of the Chiefs in this era, was a Hall of Fame head coach himself, and this Super Bowl was his magnum opus.
That's right, boys.
So, how did he beat this powerhouse of a team? Well, to mitigate the Purple People Eaters, Stram would use trap plays, end-arounds, misdirections to take advantage of the Purple People Eaters' over-aggression, getting them to over-pursue on run plays. The most famous play from the Super Bowl was a trap play called 65 toss power trap.
Urbanus is on the left side, and here's Garrett slanting in. He ran by Dixon with the extra defensive line.
On pass plays, Stram would have his O-line and his tight ends double team the Vikings D ends, Carl Eller and Jim Marshall, who are normally great at getting pressure on the QB or just knocking down quick passes at the line of scrimmage. The Chiefs would mostly throw quick passes all game, and the Vikings D end, according to some sources, Wikipedia, they wouldn't knock down a single pass the entire game. Except a clip of Jim Marshall that I have doing just that in Super Bowl IV.
This first period is half over. Dawson, good protection, swings one out, and it was batted down, I think, by Jim Marshall that got his hands up.
And the announcer even says it. And it was Jim. It was batted down, I think, by Jim Marshall. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it was clearly batted. It looked.
Wikipedia, great, but they were wrong on that one. That's why we do the research, people. Yeah. But for the most part, it worked out very well throwing quick passes. The Chiefs' biggest play of the game was a quick pass to Otis Taylor for like a 43-yard touchdown, 46-yard touchdown.
Quick snap and the quick pass to Taylor. He got away from McBee. He's inside the 15. He scores!
Now, the Purple People Eaters might be the greatest defensive line the league has ever seen, but on this day, it was another great defensive line that would shut down the Vikings offense. They did this by exposing what was normally seen as a strength for the Vikings, right? The Chiefs went after the Vikings center and NFL Hall of Famer Mick Tingelhoff, which is also a great
one of the
name.
top. I mean, honestly, one of the top 3 names in all of sports history.
Dude, it is
like,
Mick Tingelhoff.
Tingelhoff.
You gotta love it, dude. And it's Mick.
I know, yeah,
right?
dude. Like,
anyway.
Sometimes it takes a moment for those things to click. You know what I'm saying?
Such a good. Okay, Mick Tingelhoff was what was known as a Greyhound center, and in this era of the NFL, they were very popular, right? They were smaller centers that were more athletic. Tingelhoff would get off the ball quickly and get to the second line of the defense, blocking the linebackers, which was a big part of the Vikings' run game. Right?
Yeah, very
quick.
Very forward-thinking and kind of like a guy that's probably going to make the Hall of Fame for this team.
So we'll actually, you know what? You're predicting where we're going. But when I say these Greyhound centers were smaller, well, Mick only weighed 235 pounds, which you cannot be a center at that weight today.
No, yeah, I mean...
Jason Kelsey, for an example that just everyone will know, was also seen as an undersized center coming into the league. Yep. Yeah, but he was still 280 pounds.
I'll say he's definitely came in over that. I mean...
Look, I know players were typically smaller back then, but the AFL was not quite this small and had bigger guys up front on the offense and defense.
Yeah.
The nickname for the Chiefs' D-line, their defensive line in this era, and I shit you not, was the Redwood Forest. Yes, before the Taylor Swift song about another Chiefs being like a redwood in more phallic ways. Now, the Chiefs had 2 Hall of Fame defensive tackles on that line, Buck Buchanan and Curly Culp, each of whom had at least 50 pounds on Tingelhoff. Again, if you go with sources like Wikipedia, on the broadcast of the game, it had them around 30 to 40 pounds heavier, which seems to be more accurate from what I've found all around, right? But that's still much heavier, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean...
Yes. The Chiefs would have one of them line up right on top of Tingelhoff all game, right up nose to nose, not in the gap, you know, right? It was usually Curly Culp. In fact, this was kind of Curly Culp's big coming out game.
Yeah.
And this was not a defense that the Vikings were used to seeing.
Middle of the defensive huddle. That particular time, Culp was lined up in front of the offensive center for Minnesota, Mick Tingelhoff. And that's the defense that we talked about that Minnesota is not used to looking at. It occupies the center, who usually is sort of an optional blocker.
Tingelhoff could not block Culp one-on-one and needed help from the guards, which made it a lot easier for Buck Buchanan and any blitzing linebacker to chase down Joe Cap, and it's what they did all game long, right? This culminated in Cap, whose nickname was Indestructible, because he didn't get hurt. Yeah, he got injured in the 4th quarter with a bruising hit by Chiefs D-end Aaron Brown and Buck Buchanan. Yeah, they sacked him. They hurt his shoulder. Cap would not return to the game, but by this time, there wasn't much of a game left to return to.
Tremendous pursuit by Kansas City. Buchanan, 86, is first. Then Brown, 86, forces him wide. That's Buchanan. 87 is Brown, and he puts the crusher on. The crusher it is. And Malone, 63, recovered the fumble.
Man, that's reminiscent of the hit that changed the league now. Now
you can't put your body weight on him, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
imagine if they would have done it way back then.
Yeah, that may have been a penalty.
Yeah, that would definitely be one today.
Game. But the Chiefs would win the game in a blowout, 23-7. Yeah, yes, we're talking about the Vikings, so a little sad. A little sad. But it was one hell of a season for the Vikings, and it really showed that they had the right mix to be a great team for years to come. Their coach, in only his third year with the team, won their first NFL championship, got them to a Super Bowl, and had a young and incredibly talented defense. Joe Kapp would leave the team after this year, not being able to agree on a new contract with the Vikings. In 1970, they would have Gary Cuozzo as their starting quarterback, but this year was all about the defense. In 1970, for the second straight year, the Vikings defense would be first in fewest points and yards allowed, and this was now post-merger era when there was 10 more teams in the league, so, maybe even a little more impressive in 1969. All right. They would also be the first team to ever get the 1 seed in the NFC conference, because first year of that.
Yeah.
But having a middling offense would end up biting them in the end. They would lose their first playoff game at home to the 49ers and that year's league MVP, John Brody, 17-14. I know.
So
in 1971, they would have an arguably even better defense than the year before, and maybe even 1969. That stout 71 Vikings defense would only allow 9.9 points per game, leading the league for the third straight year in that stat. They nabbed 24 interceptions, pitched 3 shutouts, and held opposing quarterbacks to a passer rating of 40.4. Right? If you spiked the ball into the ground every time, you'd have a passer rating of 39.6. This was also the year Alan Page would win his league MVP, the first ever by a defensive player. The season would again come to the end in their first playoff game, losing 20-12 to the eventual Super Bowl champions that year, the Dallas Cowboys. It was again their offense that came up short for them, and a big reason for that was their quarterback. They were still using Gary Cuozzo as their starter for most of the season, but he also shared time with Norm Snead, and Bob Lee. Bob Lee actually started that playoff game and was replaced by Cuozzo in the fourth quarter, but combined, they would throw 4 interceptions and only 1 touchdown. So despite the Vikings offense outgaining Dallas 311 yards to 183 yards, they lost because of 5 turnovers, 4 of which came from their quarterbacks. In 1972, they knew exactly who could lead them back to success at quarterback, mainly because they once had him. Yeah,
always helps.
Quarterback Fran Tarkenton.
Welcome back, Fran.
They would trade the Giants 3 players in exchange for Tarkenton, Norm Snead, Bob Grimm, and Vance Clements, and their first 2 draft picks.
Ooh, that's a lot to get a player that you used to have.
Yeah. Meaning the Vikings have now spent a first, second, and third round draft pick on Fran Tarkenton.
That's quite the flex. That is for Fran.
That is.
Think about that.
And it was well worth it too. And to think worth it.
Yeah, this is not a bad trade for them. They know bad trades. This ain't it.
But it would not immediately make the difference. They would have a rough start and end to the 72 season, going 1-3 in their first 4 weeks, as well as their last 4 weeks of the season, which made them 7-7 overall, and they missed the playoffs. One of only 2 seasons in the 70s, they missed the playoffs.
Ooh.
It was a great year. Yep. Which brings us to the most successful stretch of seasons in Vikings history. Starting in 1973, they would win 6 straight division titles, 3 out of the next 4 NFC championship games, including back-to-back in 73 and 4. During that 4-year stretch, they would go 6-1 in the playoffs, not including Super Bowls. 6-1 in the playoffs, yeah. And in the regular season during those 4 years, they would go 51-14-1. Yeah, it's insane.
Pretty good.
Right. Now, in 1973, they would win their first 9 games. Their first-round draft pick that year, running back Chuck Foreman, was running his way to winning Rookie of the Year. Their defense held all but 3 of their opponents to less than 20 points, while their offense scored more than 20 in 9 games. They would beat Washington in their first playoff game, which was quite the thriller, the Vikings scoring 17 points in the fourth quarter to win it 27-20.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Right? The next week, they would travel to Dallas to face them in the NFC Championship game. Now, this game was wildly sloppy and probably the worst game of Cowboys Hall of Fame quarterback Roger Staubach's career. I know that would make you smile, right?
I love it.
The second half of this game would feature 10 turnovers between each team, with 7 consecutive drives ending in a turnover, and not on downs. Yes. Yeah. Listen to this insane sequence of drives. First, you'd have a forced fumble on the Vikings running back, Chuck Foreman. Then the Cowboys quarterback, Roger Staubach, would throw an interception. And then Fran Tarkington, Vikings quarterback, throw an interception. And then Roger Staubach would be strip sacked. And then the Vikings would fumble the quarterback running back exchange. Next one. But don't worry, because on the Cowboys' ensuing drive, Roger Staubach would throw a pick 6, which would give the Cowboys the ball right back, where Roger Staubach would throw another interception. At least it wasn't a pick 6 that time. That was
harsh.
all in a row.
That's
all in a row.
harsh. Yeah.
Staubach would finish the game completing 10 of 21 passes for 89 yards, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a lost fumble. Yeah, he turned
very Justin Fields.
Dude, yeah, he turned the ball he turned the ball over 5 times in the second half. The Vikings, they would be winning this game the whole time. They won handedly, 27-10, and it sent them to their second Super Bowl appearance, Super Bowl 8. And of course, the second time this Vikings curse would show itself. They would face the Dolphins, who the previous year had gone undefeated and won the Super Bowl, right?
Yep.
And for Super Bowl 8, Joe Namath, a man famous for predicting his own Super Bowl win, would have another all-time Super Bowl prediction. For Super Bowl 8, he said, "If Miami gets the kickoff and scores the opening drive, the game is over." Well, not only did Miami do just that, they would score a touchdown on their first 2 drives of the game. And their first 2 drives were incredibly identical. Listen to these drives. Each drive would be 10 plays with 8 rushes, 2 completed passes, 1 third down conversion, 4 total first downs, no penalties, and ended in a rushing touchdown, taking about 5.5 minutes game time. The Dolphins offense would do this in a very similar fashion to how the Chiefs beat the Vikings in Super Bowl 4s. Misdirections, trap plays, cross blocking. Turn the Purple People Eaters' aggression against them. Dolphins quarterback Bob Greasy only threw the ball 7 times, completed 6 of those. It's still the fewest pass attempts by any team in a Super Bowl. The game was over by half when the Dolphins led 17-0. The Vikings offense only scored 1 TD the entire game, and it wasn't until the fourth quarter when they were already down 24-0. The Vikings center, Mike Tingelhoff, would again have issues handling the opposing team's defensive tackle. This time, it was Manny Fernandez for the Dolphins. And the Dolphins would line up Manny right on top of Mike Tingelhoff, and it would again shut down their run game. Same thing. Dolphins would win 24-7. Yeah, we didn't talk about Zonka having it.
That's another probably top 10 name in NFL history. Like, straight
Larry
up.
Zonka is a great name.
Great fucking name.
Dude, you cannot tackle that guy one-on-one. Every tackle, at least in Super Bowl 8, when I watched it, every time he was tackled, 2 defenders had to hit him to take that dude down. And he was usually they were doing so great at the offensive line. He usually didn't get touched by the D-line. And which just meant you were hoping that a linebacker or safety would hit him early enough for one of their. It was great. Now we'll go to 1974. The Vikings would go 10-4 and win their division. Again, their young running back Chuck Foreman would lead the team in rushing and receiving. In their first playoff game in 1974, they would dominate the Cardinals, winning 30-14. They would squeeze by the Rams 14-10 to win their second consecutive NFC championship and go to their 3rd Super Bowl. It would also be the 3rd time we see This ugly Vikings curse. I know it's great, right? Super Bowl IX versus the Steelers. Feature two all-time great defenses in that steel curtain and the purple people eaters. Of course, the Miami's no-name defense was great too, and so are the Chiefs. But everybody knows the steel curtain and the purple people eaters, right?
Yeah, I mean, those are two things that are talked about very, very
right in the history of yes. All right, and those defenses would completely dominate the first half, as it would be the lowest scoring first half in Super Bowl history. The only points in that half came off of the first safety in Super Bowl history, when the Vikings running back Dave Osborne fumbled the handoff from Tarkington at the 10-yard line, and the ball rolled all the way back into the end zone, where Tarkington jumped on it, but was downed by Steelers defensive end Dwight White. Also a great name. Okay, the second half of this Super Bowl, Super Bowl IX, would start off even worse for the Vikings. The Steelers kicker actually slipped on the opening kickoff, which you think would be great for the Vikings, but the kick kind of turned into this funky squib kick, and the Vikings fumbled it. And the Steelers recovered, and 3 plays later would score a TD and go up 9-0.
So embarrassing. It should have been such an embarrassment for him. Like,
he should have helped them, should have given them some great field position.
Just fall on the ball. Just fall on it right there.
But,
like,
I mean, you don't,
You know you're not a guy who fields punt kicks. Like, you know your role. Like, that's just like a life lesson to know who you are.
Now, the Vikings would actually get close in the fourth quarter, kind of. The Steelers were still up 9-0, right? And they were backed up in their own territory and had to punt the ball. The Vikings linebacker, Matt Blair, blocked the punt, and the Vikings recover it to score a TD.
We're right back in this thing, baby.
Right back in this thing. Now, they would miss the extra point, so it stayed at 9-6. But it's only one score game, right? You're only a field goal away from tying it. Yeah, they would unfortunately never get a chance to tie it. On the Steelers' ensuing drive, they would score a touchdown, and take the lead. They'd use up almost 7 minutes of game time scoring this touchdown. The Vikings would get the ball back down 10 with only 3.5 minutes left in the game. And on the very first play of that possession, Tarkington would throw an interception. It was Tarkington's third of the game, and it capped off what was maybe the worst game of his career. Tarkington went 11 for 26 for only 102 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions with a passer rating of 14.1.
Ooh.
Yeah, remember, spiking it into the ground every time is 39.6.
I was literally about to be like, don't forget your spiking stat there.
Yeah. Almost like 3 times better if you just threw it into the ground.
Yeah.
Their running backs may have somehow done even worse. Yeah, combined, the Vikings would rush for only 17 yards on 21 attempts.
Ooh, that's under
Yeah, you heard it right. They would have more rushing attempts than they would yards. And
that's a good-ass defense. That steel curtain, that's one of the reasons why we remember that.
That's why you remember that, yes. Now, the Steelers, once again, did this by lining up either Ernie Holmes or Mean Joe Green, their defensive tackles, right over the Vikings center, Mick Tingelhoff.
You know, like, there's this saying, like, fool me once, shame on you.
Yeah.
Fool me twice, shame on me. What is it if you get fooled 3 times in a row?
Wait,
oh my God.
Wait till it's 4.
I was gonna say it's gonna happen again. I'm already frustrated with this Vikings team.
Yeah, the Vikings running backs had no room to run, and Tarkington spent the game again running for his life. The Steelers running back Franco Harris ran for a then Super Bowl record of 158 yards behind a litany of trap blocking and misdirections. Heck, I even have the announcers comparing it to Super Bowl IV.
Right up the middle. Here's the pursuit. Good fake to the outside. Sutherland never did see the handoff.
Al, you remember when Kansas City beat Minnesota in the Super Bowl championship? They used a lot of similar kind of plays, the reverses. They had Otis Taylor coming back on the route on the outside. Frank Pitts did the same thing, but Minnesota is a pursuit kind of team. They've depended on their front four a lot in the last few years. The linebackers pursue real strong, so if you can usually get around that defensive end, whether it be Eller or Marshall, you've got a pretty good gainer. Oh
yeah, the Vikings would lose Super Bowl IX 16-6. The Vikings had now lost 3 Super Bowls, and their offense had only 2 touchdowns in those 3 games. Let's move on to 1975, shall we?
Let's do it.
The Vikings would get back to their winning ways in the regular season, going 12-2, which was helped out by having one of the easiest schedules of all time. Their opponents would have a winning percentage of .346, right? And if you don't, and that's if you don't include the games they played against the Vikings. So even if you take away their opponent's loss to the Vikings, they still only had a win percentage of .346. It was the lowest the league had seen since 1950, and it would be the lowest they would see until the 99 Rams. That 1975 Vikings team had 5 first-team All-Pros, and Fran Tarkenton would win MVP of the league. To show how different the league was back then, Fran would win his MVP by throwing for 2,994 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. Also rushing for a whopping 108 yards and 2 more touchdowns. But again, this was a very different league, right?
Yeah.
These stats would make him second in passing yards this year and tied for the most passing touchdowns. And if you count his rushing touchdowns, he led the league in touchdowns. I know. He would also lead his team to first place in the conference. If you do all of that today as a starting quarterback, there is a good chance you will win MVP.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
it was a hell of a year for Tarkenton. Yeah.
Attaboy for him.
Right? Yeah. Unfortunately, the playoffs would be not so nice to them this year. Not as nice as that regular season. The Vikings would face the Cowboys, who were becoming quite the playoff rival for them. And the Vikings would lose in heartbreaking but historic fashion.
Love history.
With a Hail Mary play from the Cowboys, but it was not just any Hail Mary play. It was the Hail Mary play. The one that made the term Hail Mary synonymous with desperation heaves to the end zone by the losing team in the waning seconds of a game. This was one hell of a game, too. The Vikings were heavily favored in it, seeing as they were, the defending NFC champs, 2-time defending NFC champs. And the Cowboys, this was supposed to be a rebuilding year for them. They had just replaced 12 vets with rookies. The Vikings, however, would find themselves down 3 in the 4th quarter. No worries, though. They would score a touchdown and take back the lead with about 5 minutes left. After a couple of punts from each team, the Cowboys would have the ball at their own 9-yard line with 1:51 left on the clock. The Cowboys would get the ball down to their own 31-yard line when disaster struck. Quarterback Roger Staubach was unable to reel in a low snap and fumbled the ball, but was able to recover it back at the 24-yard line. After 2 more incomplete passes, the Cowboys would now be faced with a 4th and 16. But again, what seems like what should be great for the Vikings ends in disaster. Staubach and wide receiver Drew Pearson then connected for a 25-yard completion on the sideline that was only ruled a catch because of the old push-out rule. Pearson was able to get 1 foot down and would have gotten another foot down if it weren't for being pushed out of bounds by the Vikings defense. By today's rules, that would not have been a completion, and it would have essentially ended the game and sealed the victory for the Vikings. That was not the rule, however, right? Back then, if a receiver caught the ball and would have landed in bounds but was unable to get 2 feet in bounds only because the defender pushed him out of bounds, it was still ruled a catch, right? It's a judgment call from the officials.
Controversial opinion. I wish it was still the rule.
Okay, I don't.
I said controversial for a reason.
All right, I don't agree. But,
yeah.
Okay, this would put the Cowboys at the 50-yard line, where 2 plays later, they would make history with a pass now known as the Hail Mary pass. But it wasn't the typical situation that we see for Hail Mary passes today, where there's only enough there's only enough time left on the clock for one more play, and they have all the receivers run down to the end zone, they bomb it down to them, come down. That is not what happened here. There was still 32 seconds left, and it was 2nd and 10.
Oh.
Yeah. And, well, you know what? Let's watch that one as well, right?
See it.
Now was to come the play that one expert said would be talked about as long as the game of football is played. Incredibly, unbelievably, the Cowboys had scored on a miracle play. As Roger Staubach said in the locker room, it was a Hail Mary pass. I threw as hard as I could and prayed. Minnesota didn't share Staubach's jubilation and claimed there had been offensive interference by Pearson on the play. Let's take another look at the controversial touchdown from a unique vantage point in the end zone. Once the ball is in the air, both receiver and defender can go for the ball. And in the opinion of the officials, that is just what occurred. The miracle play by Pearson had given the Cowboys the lead with only 32 seconds left in the game.
I mean, I don't know if there was much push off there. That was.
I want to say it's a push off because of the star on the helmet, but I mean, like, I'm fine with that push.
You're fine with the call. I'm fine with that contact. Fine with it. Now,
I want to not be because of the hat I'm wearing.
Yes. Yeah.
But
thank you, NFL greats. Harry Callis, who's narrating that one. Okay. All right. Now, if you notice a little orange thing coming to the screen there at the end, right? For a lot of people thought that might have been a flag. It was not. It was an actual orange being thrown by the fans in the stands. Not a flag for a push off.
I thought
that's what the Vikings were hoping for. That it was a flag for a push off, but no, it was an actual orange being thrown from the stands. But a flag was thrown after this play on the Vikings for unsportsmanlike conduct. I know, it's... And they were in the Vikings stadium, and the fans were so pissed off by this that one of them threw a bottle at an official and hit him in the head. Yeah.
This is before the plastic bottles, too, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Here occurred, however, a distasteful incident which diverted the focus of the game from the field to the fans. Armand Terzian, the field judge, was felled by a bottle thrown from the stands, and the game was suddenly transcended by something far more important. Luckily, Terzian was able to leave the field under his own power, but it could have been far more serious an injury. After the game, the Minnesota Vikings offered a $5,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for the senseless act.
I'm gonna guess they weren't found.
Yeah, that's...
But yeah. Who threw the bottle at the Vikings? Let's see if we can find out.
I gotta do some research.
We gotta do it.
It was a whiskey bottle, too.
Ooh. Well, I mean...
And the forehead is at this...
When you start throwing bottles down on the field, you've probably been drinking a little more than beer, right?
They give me the age. So.
Do not know. No idea if the perp was ever capped. The next year, in 1976, the Vikings found themselves once again at the top of the NFC. They went 11-2-1. They had 8 Pro Bowlers as well as 3 All-Pros. Tarkington, now in his 16th year as an NFL quarterback, owned all the major career passing records by the end of the season. He would have the most career passing yards, touchdowns, and completions in NFL history. All these records have since been broken, but, you can only be judged by your contemporaries, and Tarkington was one of the best the league had ever seen up to this point. In fact, let's enjoy some highlights, as Tarkington's highlights are just as eye-popping now as you see when you watch like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Caleb Williams making incredible plays. Tarkington was doing that very same thing well before all these guys.
Love that. Things you have to do when your center's, smaller than you.
He's a Hall of Fame center. Just being able to run around, evade tacklers. Yeah. And then just, no, dude, look at that. And then.
Yeah.
You don't expect to see this shit way back then. Whoa. Dude, look at get off me. And check it. Lateral.
Yeah.
There's another here's a lateral that he did for a touchdown.
boom.
I'm pretty sure on this play, he is technically down, but I don't think he was called down. And, replay, not.
Definitely down.
Yeah, just thought we'd enjoy some so how fucking good Fran Tarkenton was.
Fran the man.
If all of those stats, with all of his record stats didn't convince you, his play has to. Back to their 1976 season. Now, again, they, were first in the NFC. They would easily dispatch of Washington in their first playoff game, winning 35-20. They entered the fourth quarter up 35-6, so it really wasn't even as close as it seems. The next week in the NFC Championship game versus the Rams, it went almost just as well. They started the game up 17-0 and finished with a 24-13 win. Their cornerback, Bobby Bryant, had a career day. In this game, he would return a blocked punt, He would return a blocked punt 90 yards for a touchdown and have 2 interceptions. Okay. Which brings us
You returned a blocked punt 90 yards?
A blocked kick.
Okay. Sorry. That's just what had me there.
He would return a blocked kick 90 yards for a touchdown and have 2 interceptions.
That's insane.
Which brings us to the last time this ugly curse shows itself. For the 4th time in 8 seasons and the 3rd time in 4 seasons, the Vikings would be going back to the Super Bowl. This time it'd be Super Bowl 11 versus the Raiders, the team that only existed because the Vikings stabbed the AFL in the back.
Oh my God, they bookended it.
They bookended it.
God, I love a good open and close story like that.
I know, right? You would hope that if this is the last time the Vikings made the Super Bowl, spoilers. So you'd hope that that's enough for the curse. You would,
wow.
I even have it written down. I'm not sure if it makes it more poetic, tragic, or both. A poetic tragedy. My favorite You song. Okay. Now, the Vikings were 7-point favorites.
Of course, why would they not be?
Right, despite the Raiders only losing 1 game that year. And if you believe Red Hot Chili Peppers lead singer Anthony Kiedis, 2 unnamed Raiders players from that team bought some weed from Anthony Kiedis' dad and got high before the game.
Why would he lie about that?
Why would Anthony Kiedis, why would he lie about that? The Vikings did block a punt in the first quarter, the first blocked punt in Hall of Fame punter Ray Guy's career. This set the Vikings up at the Raiders' 3-yard line and seemed to be just what they need to take control of the game. Yeah, except 2 plays later, they would fumble and give the ball right back to the Raiders. Yeah,
that totally checks, actually.
Yeah, the Raiders completely dominated the game from the second quarter on. The first quarter was scoreless, but the Raiders would put up 16 points in the second quarter and take a 16-0 lead into halftime. Yeah, by the time we get to the fourth quarter, it would be 19-0. The Vikings would finally score a TD in the fourth quarter to cut the deficit to 19-7, but then give up 13 unanswered points. Yeah. On the Vikings' very last drive of the game, with the comeback being impossible, they put in backup quarterback Bob Lee. He would actually lead the offense on an 86-yard drive and throw a touchdown pass to make it 32-14, but by this time the Raiders were already celebrating as there was only 25 seconds left in the game.
Let me guess, they lined up a defensive tackle directly across from the center.
Yeah.
A lot of quick passes.
Let me get there.
Sorry. I just saw a trend.
Yeah. So the Raiders set a Super Bowl record at the time, 429 yards of offense, with 288 of those coming in the first half. The Vikings' 3 Super Bowl losses in 4 years all featured the opposing teams dominating the line of scrimmage and running the ball more than 50 times. On offense, the Raiders actually didn't do much of what we saw from the previous 3 Super Bowls. They didn't have to use much trap or cross blocking, as they had 2 Hall of Fame linemen, Art Shell and Gene Upshaw, on the left side of their offensive line, and the Raiders spent most of the game running to that side and simply overpowering the Vikings.
Again, nothing fancy. These guys haven't really had any really trick plays. Just look straight, right ahead. Have a cutoff block over on the right side. by Vela, but it was really nothing fancy.
On defense, however, it was much of the same. The Raiders would line up their nose tackle, Dave Rowe, right over Mick Tingelhoff, who again had issues blocking the much larger tackle and would free up the Raiders linebackers to hunt the Vikings running backs and chase down Tarkington all day. I know, dude. 4 times. 4 times.
Like, at some point, like, I get he's a Hall of Famer, he's great, but, like,
you gotta do something. You gotta have a game plan at least.
You gotta have like
something to be like, we need to give them help and still block. You still have make sure the rest of our line can block. I don't know. I'm not a Hall of Fame head coach, but Bud Grant is, and you think he would have had it figured out. But you know, you have all that success up to that point. You think, anyways.
And he's got a great name. I mean, how can you bench a guy with
Mick Tingelhoff? I know.
It's such a good
You're
name.
not going to do that.
No,
you know?
No, I'm not benching that guy.
Yeah.
I'll go down with that ship as my captain of my ship.
Hell yeah, dude. The curse of the Vikings had been merciless to them. In 4 Super Bowls, they never had a lead. They never scored in the first half or the first 40 minutes of the game, and only had 4 scoring drives from their offense in these 4 games.
Average of 1 per game.
And by the time they did score, the other team would already have more points than the Vikings would get the entire game.
Yeah.
In total, the Vikings would be outscored in these Super Bowls 95-34. It's bad. I hope they have paid their dues for Super Bowls. They've done enough, man. Okay?
Yeah,
they backstabbed the AFL League and joined the NFL, but the leagues eventually merged. They all ended up in the same place.
We had a full circle moment with it.
We did.
That should be open and closed on the curse. I mean,
they lost to the founder of the AFL's team and the kind of team of the AFL, you know.
Yeah.
And then they ended it by losing to the team that they created.
Yeah, I mean,
from that backstabbing. Perfect book endings, right?
Yeah,
perfect. Yes.
Couldn't write it better.
Exactly. The next 2 seasons, the Vikings would win their division, but lose in the playoffs against familiar foes. They would lose the NFC Championship game to the Cowboys in 1977, and then lose their first playoff game in 1978 to the Rams. After the 77 season, Alan Page would go to the Bears to finish out the last 4 years of his career, and then, of course, go on to be the first black justice on the Minnesota Supreme Court. Yes.
That's dope.
Dude, yeah, he was going to law school while he was playing a Hall of Fame football career. He also wrote 4 children's books with his daughter, because Alan Page, he's not just a legendary NFL player or overachiever, but also a legendary human.
Sounds like it. That sounds like a video on its own right.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
he also ran marathons a bunch. Alan Page is the man. After the 78 season, Fran Tarkington would retire. When he retired, he still, had the record for most career passing yards, completions, touchdowns, as well as the most rushing yards by a quarterback and the most wins by a quarterback. Okay. Now, all of those records have since been broken.
Yeah.
Right? The one record Tarkington still has, though, is the most seasons with a rushing touchdown by a quarterback at 15.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
Right? But Tarkington's retirement seemed to mark the end of a golden era for the Vikings. In 1979, they would miss the playoffs, going 7-9. It was their only losing season of the 70s, and their first one since 1967. I mean, but the 70s were an incredible decade for the Vikings, the best in team history. And while it is remembered fondly by them and their fans, it is also plagued by the 4 Super Bowl losses. Only 3 teams in the 70s had a higher winning percentage than the Vikings. The Cowboys, the Raiders, and the Dolphins, who all won a championship in the 70s by going through the Vikings either in a Super Bowl or NFC Championship game. Now, the Vikings would make it back to the playoffs in 1980 and 82, but never get past the divisional round. They lost their first game in each of those years. In 82, it would also be their first year in the Metrodome, right? a brand new dome stadium, as the name implies, that took them out of the cold and, into the warmer indoors. Their original stadium was the outdoor Metropolitan Stadium, or the Met, or the Old Met, as it's now referred to. Metropolitan Stadium, while not being designed well for football, was still beloved by the fans as it gave them one hell of a home field advantage in the winter months of the season. The Vikings were 7-3 in playoffs in the Old Met. Some may feel that moving away from the frigid outdoors of the Old Met to a domed stadium may have even started their second curse, and why they have failed to get back to the Super Bowl since. But I'm not so sure. I've got a different theory on where that second curse came from, which we'll get to in just a moment. But their great coach, Bud Grant, would retire after the 83 season, but then actually come back for the 85 season before retiring permanently. They would miss the playoffs for 4 consecutive seasons from 1983 to 86, which is still their longest playoff drought since they first made the playoffs in 1968.
That's a pretty impressive,
I know, dude. Only 4 seasons, man. Most teams wish that was the case.
Yeah. And then we have the freaking Jets.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's been, over a decade.
It's Mark Sanchez.
Oof. In this time, they were having difficulty finding their next identity as a team, as it's very hard to go from one great team to the next, right?
Yeah, you gotta have a drop-off.
You would, yes. After having the kind of success the Vikings had just had, most teams do have a down period, and that was the case for the Vikings through most of the 80s until we get to 1987. In 87, the Vikings would have a Cinderella run. While only having an 8-7 record, there was one less game that year because of a players' strike. But that 8-7 record would still make them a wild card team. In their first playoff game, they would travel to New Orleans and be 6.5-point underdogs to the Saints. But they would win that game 44-10. It is still the most lopsided victory in the wild card round of the NFC playoffs. It's something.
Yeah.
The next week in the divisional round, they were even larger underdogs, 11-point underdogs to the 49ers. But the Vikings would whoop that Niner ass up and down the field. They would be leading 20-3 at half and would end up winning 36-24. Leading the way would be their wide receiver, Carter. No, not Chris Carter. He's a rookie with the Eagles at this point. But Anthony Carter, who had 227 receiving yards, catching 10 passes from quarterback Wade Wilson. No, not that Wade Wilson. Yes, this Wade Wilson, the quarterback for the Vikings for this period. The next week, they would go to Washington for the NFC Championship game, their first one in 10 years. They would lose this game 17-10 in a defensive battle that came down to the last minute and against the eventual Super Bowl champions that year, right?
Yeah.
This loss, however, it was anything but heartbreaking. They shouldn't even have gotten that far. And they showed that this team was really building towards something, right? A bright future. And then in the next season, in 1988, it seemed to confirm that, right? In 1988, they had the best defense in the league. They led the league in takeaways with 53 and held their opponents to the fewest yards and first downs. They didn't just hold opposing quarterbacks to the worst passer rating of that year, but the worst passer rating of the entire decade at 41.2. Yes, it's not quite the 40.4 their 71 defense had, but it's still 5th all-time in the Super Bowl era.
That's insane.
Their offense was also ranked 7th overall, so it was a pretty good team. They would improve their record to 11-5 and go back to the playoffs again as a wildcard team. In their first playoff game, they would beat the Rams 28-17 and then go back to San Francisco to face the 49ers again for the divisional round. This time, though, it didn't go as well. Once again, they would lose to the eventual Super Bowl champions 34-9. Right? Yeah. And
I got that ass waxed.
And even though the Vikings didn't get as far as the previous year, it seemed to be, that they were still building towards something, right?
Yeah.
And they were certainly improving. But as things go for the Vikings, anything that should be great for them Yeah, it ends in disaster.
Nice.
Which actually leads us in to the second curse of the Minnesota Vikings. In 1989, the Vikings GM, Mike Lynn, being frustrated for some reason about the playoff losses from the years prior, despite his team seemingly getting better, he felt what his team needed to get over the hump and make it back to the Super Bowl was a superstar player for their offense. And he saw an opportunity to add this type of player. You know where I'm going with this. When the Cowboys put running back Herschel Walker on the trade block. The Cowboys head coach, Jimmy Johnson, wanted to completely rebuild his team and was willing to trade his best player to do so. The Browns offered him 2 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks. Jimmy Johnson then used that as leverage against the Vikings. On October 12th, 1989, he told the Vikings they had until 6:30 p.m. to make a better offer or Walker would be traded to the Browns. And it worked. Vikings GM Mike Lynn offered to trade their first, second, and sixth-round picks in the next year's draft, as well as 5 players. But there was a caveat. One that the Vikings GM Mike Lynn didn't think would come into play.
This is one of the dumbest caveats of all time.
I know, it's a caveat for the Cowboys. I don't even know why.
I don't get why he would do this.
Okay. All 5 of the players that the Vikings were trading would be tied to conditional draft picks. Very high draft picks. The condition for the Cowboys to receive these draft picks would be to cut or trade the 5 players they were getting from the Vikings before the end of the season, right? Yeah. The players and the picks that they were tied to are linebacker Jesse Solomon, tied to the Vikings' first-round pick in 91, linebacker David Howard, tied to their second-round pick in 91, corner Isaac Holt, tied to their first-round pick in 92, running back Derek Nelson, tied to their second-round pick in 92, and finally, defensive end Alex Stewart, tied to their third-round pick in 92. Remember, that's on top of their first and second and sixth round picks for 1990, right?
Yep.
Vikings GM Mike Lynn didn't think Jimmy Johnson would cut all of these players or trade them, seeing as they were almost all better than the players the Cowboys had at the time. But Jimmy Johnson wasn't interested in any of these players. He only wanted the draft picks. And by the end of that year, he had cut or traded all 5 of those players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meaning that the Cowboys now controlled the Vikings' first 2 draft picks in 1990 and 91, as well as their first 3 draft picks in 92. The Vikings, in addition to getting Herschel Walker, also ended up getting Dallas's 3rd, 5th, and 10th round pick for the 1990 draft and their 3rd round pick in the 1991 draft. But well worth it for the Cowboys, who controlled an extra 1st and 2nd round pick for those drafts.
That is, like, to this day, that is still a shocking amount of it's compensation for...
It is still one of the worst trades of all time.
Whenever you... Obviously, recency bias sits with you, but hearing it laid out like that all over again, for the 12th time in my life.
The Russell Wilson trade
and Deshaun Watson.
I don't know about Deshaun Watson.
It's pretty bad.
Maybe. Well,
if the Texans would have done something with some of the Deshaun Watson picks, like the Cowboys do, like you're about to announce what the Cowboys do with these picks, that's what I think really.
Yes, and we just saw the Russell Wilson one also led to the Seahawks building a championship.
It absolutely did. So that's kind of why I put the Deshaun Watson at 3rd.
I don't know, but it's so bad.
It's so bad. The Browns.
Okay,
it's amazing that the Browns try to get involved with another one of the worst trades of all time.
Yeah,
of course they had to be involved with it. They were used
in it. Yes, a terrible trade by itself doesn't curse a team, right? It needs to be a terrible trade that completely wrecks the team. And that's exactly what it did.
Of course.
Now, it didn't do it immediately. The Vikings did finish the year 10-6 and make it to the playoffs, but then in their first playoff game, they got crushed by the eventual Super Bowl champions, the 49ers, 41-13. Right? Yeah. So how did it wreck the team? Well, their GM Mike Lynn took what was the league's best defense and gutted it. 4 out of the 5 players traded were on the defense, and 3 of those players were starters. Yeah, the only one that wasn't a starter was their rookie, the defensive end Alex Stewart, who was competing for the starting job when he broke his wrist in the preseason. So, yeah. Linebacker Jesse Solomon was not only a starter, but the team's best linebacker and led the team in tackles the year before, on the best defense in the league.
Yeah.
The atmosphere in the locker room had completely changed. The players felt like they were really building towards something special, and then their GM cast off some of their best players and draft picks for one guy. They felt as though the front office saw this one guy, Herschel Walker, as more important than the team itself. A team that cursed itself against the AFL/AFC by stabbing them in the back, now cursed itself against the NFC by making one of the worst trades in American sports history to a rival NFC team and essentially stabbed themselves in the back. The theme for the second Vikings curse would not be blowout losses in the Super Bowl. It would be utterly heartbreaking losses in the playoffs, or to make the playoffs, as we see in one occasion. In 1990, the Vikings would miss the playoffs, only going 6-10, and their defense would drop to 13th in the league. In 91, they wouldn't do much better. They would go 8-8, miss the playoffs. And after the 91 season, they would let Herschel Walker go in free agency. So by the time we get to the 92 draft, where the Cowboys controlled the Vikings' first 3 picks, the Vikings no longer had Herschel Walker, the guy they traded those picks for.
I'm sorry, I know I'm supposed to be siding with the Vikings on this whole video, especially when it's about the Cowboys
I know,
trade,
it's
but
just
God, they deserve it. Curses are typically deserved. Like, let's just throw that out there. Like, if you're cursed, you deserve it, so we're allowed to laugh at you for being cursed.
Yes, the Vikings, as much as I do like them, they did deserve these curses.
They brought it upon themselves.
Well earned. Herschel Walker never had a 1,000-yard season with the Vikings and couldn't help them win or do anything in the playoffs.
Of course not.
Meanwhile, the Cowboys used these picks to build their dynasty, drafting players like cornerback Kevin Smith, safety and 3-time first-team All-Pro Darren Woodson. Oh, and to fill Herschel Walker's spot, they drafted Hall of Fame running back Emmitt Smith.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. In the following draft, in the 90 draft.
Oh, yeah. All-time leading rusher.
In league history.
Yeah.
Yes, not just
That's why I said all time.
Yeah.
That is why I had to say all time. The dude is the GOAT of the position.
Yeah. Starting in 92, the Cowboys would, of course, win 3 of the next 4 Super Bowls.
Thanks, Vikes. Thanks.
The football gods had cursed the Vikings while giving the Cowboys the ultimate reward. It's a devastating story for all. The Cowboys fans. Gross. After, that 91 season, the Vikings would fire their coach and successor to Bud Grant, Jerry Burns, and hire a coach who is still their second longest tenured head coach in team history, Dennis Green.
Oh, Dennis.
Dennis would immediately turn the team around. In 92, despite not having their actual first 3 picks, I think they still had other picks from, trades, but yeah.
Find a way.
I gotta find it. In 92, the Vikings would go 11-5, win their division, and go back to the playoffs. They would lose their first playoff game that year against Washington, but it was a great and much-needed fresh start for the franchise.
Yeah.
In 93 and 94, they would also make the playoffs. They would miss it in 95, but make it again in 96. However, in all those playoff years, they wouldn't win any playoff games.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. In 1997, they would acquire quarterback Randall Cunningham. That's right. Although Brad Johnson would be the starter for most of the season until he was benched in week 14.
Brad Johnson?
That Brad Johnson, yes. Future Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Brad Johnson, yes. Cool. Wide receiver Chris Carter would catch a leading 13 touchdown passes. The team would finish 9-7, but it was good enough for a wild card playoff spot. The first playoff game was against the Giants, and the Vikings would find themselves in a dire situation with just over 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter and down 9 points, 22-13. But Randall Cunningham would find wide receiver Jake Reed in the end zone to close the gap 22-20 with 90 seconds left in the game. Now, instant replay would show that Jake Reed's left foot was partially out of bounds when he caught that touchdown, but the call on the field was a touchdown, and this was during the NFL's 6-year hiatus on their replay review system. Yeah. So there was no overturning the call on the field. On the ensuing kickoff, the Giants wouldn't be able to handle the onside kick, and the Vikings would recover at the 39-yard line. I know, you like pain to the Giants. The Vikings, after recovering that onside kick, would march all the way down to the Giants' 5-yard line, where they would kick the game-winning field goal with 10 seconds left in the game. Do we remember the kicker for the Vikings that year? No, we don't.
No.
Yeah, well, okay. They would lose the next week to the 49ers in the divisional round, but it was a miracle playoff win, right? And it was their first in almost a decade. And it would be a great catalyst for what brings us to the best Vikings team, well, second best Vikings team of all time. In the 1998 draft, with their first pick in the draft, the Vikings would select a wide receiver that only fell to them at pick 21 because of some off-the-field issues in college. Wide receiver, Randy Moss.
Out of Marshall University.
Yes. He only went to Marshall because in college he had smoked some weed. And his senior year in high school, he got into a fight.
Yeah.
Which nowadays would make almost no difference in your draft stock, I don't think.
No.
No. Randy Moss would revolutionize the Vikings offense, catching a record-breaking 17 touchdown passes, still the most ever by a rookie.
It's gross.
Dude. Which, he would of course win Rookie of the Year and help propel the Vikings offense to one of the best the league had ever seen up to that point. The Vikings offense put up 556 points during the regular season, which was a record at the time. And it's still 7th best all time. They had 2 future Hall of Famer wide receivers, Randy Moss and Chris Carter. Their running back, Robert Smith, had over 1,000 yards rushing. And Randall Cunningham had his best year of his career, tossing 35 touchdown passes to only 10 interceptions. It was his only first-team All-Pro selection of that year, although he did have 2 second-team All-Pros before then. The team would go 15-1 that year. It is still the most wins in a single season for the Vikings. And their only loss that year was by 3 points. They had 10 Pro Bowlers and 5 first-team All-Pros and 3 second-team All-Pros. They put up more than 30 points in 11 games in the regular season and even in their first playoff game. Falling just shy of that 30-point mark would ultimately cost them, however, in their second playoff game, which I guess we should talk about now, as it is the first time we see the second curse of the Vikings, their NFC/Herschel Walker curse. Now, after beating the Cardinals 41-21 in the divisional round of the playoffs, they would face the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC Championship game. Now, the Vikings offense would roll in this game as it had been all season. With 2 minutes and 11 seconds left in the game, the Vikings were up by 7 and had positioned themselves to go up by 10 to put the game away. All they needed was a 38-yard field goal, which is where we should talk about their other record-setting player for that year. Along with having the best offense the league has probably ever seen up to that point, they also had the best kicker the league had ever seen, at least for a single season. Their kicker, Gary Anderson, had become the very first kicker in the history of the NFL not to miss a single field goal or extra point the entire season. So a 38-yard field goal from the league's best kicker should be all but guaranteed. But as mentioned before, all seemingly great things for the Vikings ends in tragedy. John Madden, the coach that beat the Vikings in their last Super Bowl appearance, as well as the last time we saw their first curse, would now give the Vikings an all-time announcer's curse to bring about the first time we see their second curse. I'm going to have you listen to this for yourselves.
So that's a pretty good bet. If you say, do you think Gary Anderson will make this field goal? The answer should probably be yes.
39 yards away, and it's not good.
Damn.
Yeah, didn't hear Matt in there. He said, if you think Gary Anderson is going to make this field goal, the answer is probably yes.
Pretty good bet.
Damn.
The Falcons would then march 71 yards and score the game-tying touchdown, sending the game to overtime. In overtime, the Vikings offense did get the ball first. This was still in overtime with sudden death, and you would think the best offense in the league should have no problem at least getting back into field goal range for their kicker. But they didn't. They punted the ball to the Falcons, who were able to get into field goal range, and set up a 38-yard field goal for their own kicker named Anderson. That's right.
Morton.
Yes, it was Morton Anderson, and he would make his 38-yard field goal and send the Falcons to their first Super Bowl.
Fun little thing. You know how the year before the Vikings lost to the 49ers?
Yeah.
You know who the kicker was for that 49ers team?
Was it Morton Anderson?
Gary Anderson.
Gary Anderson! Oh my gosh.
And that year, Gary Anderson was 29 of 36.
Not bad.
Not a bad year. Not a bad year, but let's see. Inside of 40 yards that year, he was 9 of 12.
9 of 12. Okay.
I mean, he was he had a career number of 119 out of 134 inside of
40 yard or
inside that 30 to 40 yard range.
40 yard range.
So you expect him to make that. Historically, throughout his career,
he was like 90%.
Yeah.
I think. I'll run the numbers. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, mathematics, right?
Right.
But I mean, he was a very good kicker from that range.
For his entire career. And he had a very long career.
He did. I mean, he kicked from 82 to 2000.
I know. He would still be on the Vikings kicker for the next,
until 2002.
Jeez.
Yeah, he finished the 2002 season as the Vikings kicker. I mean, he played 14 games that year. I think it was 2000 exactly. He was 22 of 23.
Damn.
So, I mean, this is a guy who had 2 fantastic seasons with this team.
The 1998 Minnesota Vikings are not only seen as one of the best teams to never win a Super Bowl, but probably the best team to never make a Super Bowl. They were the first 15-win team to not make a Super Bowl. The only other 2 15-win teams that have joined them since in that devastating category, coincidentally, 2 of their NFC North rivals, the Packers and Lions. I think it was the 2011 Packers after they won Rodgers.
Okay, yeah. And then
Super Bowl season, yeah. And then we just saw with the Lions a couple of years ago, right?
2 years ago. Of course, there's a 17th game at that point, so they were 2-loss team opposed to the 1. But still, I mean,
still when you win 15 games, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
the loss against the Falcons is still seen by Vikings fans as the most devastating loss in their team's history.
They should have won that game.
They never really got close to winning any of their Super Bowls, but they should have won this game. They had the best offense and kicker the league had ever seen, and yet when they needed them most, each of those failed them. How can you explain it other than a curse?
That's the only way to explain that.
Dude. The next year, in 1999, that horrifying loss would somewhat carry over. They started the season 2-4 and benched quarterback Randall Cunningham for Jeff George. But it actually turned their season around. They would win their next 8 of 10 games and finish with a 10-6 record and get a wild card playoff spot. They would beat the Cowboys.
All right, there we go.
First playoff game. And then lose to the greatest show on turf and eventual Super Bowl champions, the Rams.
Don't hang your head on that one.
But again, they keep losing to the eventual Super Bowl champs.
I mean, if you're going to lose to the champs.
Champs, right. I mean, except they lost to the Falcons. Their quarterback, Jeff George, was excellent in those 2 playoff games, throwing for a combined 634 yards and 7 touchdowns to only 1 interception.
That's pretty excellent.
It's pretty good for 2 games, yes. But the Vikings would move on from him in the offseason, having a young quarterback in waiting on their bench. In the 1999 draft, the Vikings had 2 first-round picks, the number 11 and 29th overall picks. With the number 11 pick, they would select number 11, Dante Culpepper, who would go on to play for 11 seasons.
There's no way.
Yes, selected 11, wore 11, played 11
that
seasons.
Seems intentional
Not all
on
for
his
the
part.
a little bit, right?
Yeah,
you
yeah,
think like that last year he went to just so he could get 11?
Absolutely. I'm like, well, 11 by lucky number.
I mean, well, okay. This is look, it's the champions. This is from back then. This is from when Dante Culpepper. Well, this is from like 2000, 2001. Got it for Christmas then when I was, like 13 or so. I was a Viking. I really liked the Vikings, especially this
Not
era.
with that squad like those three.
Dude. With the 29th pick, they would select Demetrius Underwood, a defensive end who had troubles in college, but the Vikings felt, if they could handle Randy Moss's issues and become one of the best offenses in the league, surely they could handle Underwood's issues and maybe have the best defense in the league. Demetrius Underwood, however, would go AWOL one day into training camp and a day after signing a 5-year, $5.3 million contract with a $1.75 million signing bonus. Demetrius deserves his own video, and it's one I have coming out. You've seen it. I'll have it coming out during draft time. Remarkable story. We just don't have time for it now.
Yeah, I mean.
All right. In the 2000 season, they would start Dante Culpepper at quarterback, and it would bring them immediate success. They won their first 7 games and finished with an 11-5 record. Culpepper would have a combined 40 touchdowns, 33 through the air and another 7 on the ground. He would also rush for 470 yards. They would win their division, lock up the 2 seed in the NFC, and march into the playoffs against a team that was not ready for them. They beat the Saints 34-16 in the divisional round, with Culpepper dazzling in his first playoff game. He would throw for 305 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Vikings were once again off to the NFC Championship game. They would be facing the 1 seed in the NFC, the New York Giants. But despite this, they were still 1-point favorites, even being the road team. The game, however, got off to a horrible start for the Vikings and never got better. Because of a fumbled kickoff, the Giants would go up 14-0 before the Vikings offense ever got on the field. My boy, Dante Culpepper, would have a terrible game, only throwing for 78 yards and turning the ball over 4 times. They would lose 41-0, or as Randy Moss famously coined the game in what is still known by today, 41 to donut. Yeah. This game has come under some scrutiny, though, or people might call it a conspiracy theory. An article in the Toronto Globe and Mail, which I think was like a Canadian tabloid, would claim that the Giants cheated in this game by listening in on the Vikings headsets.
You know what? It sounds logical.
Listen, in an interview with a Cleveland radio station in 2009, Vikings safety Robert Griffith said, quote, "You would be hard-pressed to tell me it was really equal playing field. When we hit the field, they were everywhere we were trying to be. It was almost like they knew the call. I have no evidence, and I'm not going to speculate," which is what you say while you're speculating.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's...
But that team was definitely better than a 41-0 drumming. When we made a check on defense, they knew exactly where we were at and what we were doing. It was almost like every play we called, they had the counter to it. Now, I'll let you decide for yourself if the Giants cheated or not, but I will remind you who the Giants' offensive coordinator was that year. Do you know who it was?
Go ahead and tell. Go ahead.
A coach who is not well liked amongst the Vikings faithful, I'll tell you that. Because this would only be the second dirtiest thing he did to the Vikings. It was Sean f***ing Payton. What a douche.
Of course it was Sean Payton.
Yes.
Now,
that guy. Fairish to the Giants. The Vikings defense wasn't very good that year. They were like 24th in points allowed. giving up like 23.1 points a game. The Giants had the 5th best defense that year themselves. The Vikings, though, had the 5th best offense. Pretty even there. And the Giants' offense was completely average, ranking like 15th in the league. So I don't take all that for what you will.
Yeah, I mean, they were quarterbacked by Kerry Collins.
Kerry Collins, yes.
I mean, so that should tell you all you need to know about the mediocrity that their offense was.
Yeah, and then got
15th in the league,
pretty much just as bad as in the Super Bowl as they beat the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean,
it wasn't.
They did not fumble their first kickoff.
They did not. No.
Kerry Collins was a full experience
for the Giants fans.
Oh, absolutely.
2001 would not start well. Their offensive tackle, Corey Stringer, who was their first-round draft pick in the 95 draft, and who had just made his first Pro Bowl the year prior, he died of heat stroke the second day of training camp. The day before, on the first day of training camp, Corey had left practice early after vomiting multiple times and being so exhausted he had to be carted off the field. A picture of him vomiting made it into the Minneapolis newspaper, the Star Tribune. Corey was embarrassed by this photo and that he had to leave practice early and vowed to make it up to the team. When the team took the practice field the morning of the second day, the heat index was already at 90 degrees and climbing, and the team was practicing in full pads. Corey would vomit once during this practice, but pushed through and finished that first practice. Not long after, however, while he was still doing some post-practice drills, hitting the blocking bag, he would collapse. He was taken to the trainer's room, where he eventually lost all consciousness. He was taken to a hospital, where his temperature was 108.8. He would never regain consciousness, and 13 hours later, died of multiple organ failure due to heat stroke. There's a lot to get into with this story that we will unfortunately not have time for here, like with how the Vikings handled things leading up to the death, the culture of this sort of thing in the NFL at the time, the pressure for players to maintain a certain weight, and even the battle his widow had to go through after all this. I'll just say that his death was preventable and should have been prevented. At this time, heat stroke was known about, of course, but not taken all too seriously in athletics. And a lot of the trainers were not properly trained on how to handle it. His death completely changed how the NFL approached heat stroke. Not only in, treating it, but in how to prevent it. As part of the settlement that Corey's widow Kelsey Stringer had with the NFL in 2009, yes, it took almost a decade to settle, the NFL, as part of that settlement, would team up with Gatorade and the University of Connecticut and open the Corey Stringer Institute, where it is still at today, the University of Connecticut, helping to prevent sudden death in athletes, and it's done some great work in heat stroke prevention and treatment. The NFL, NCAA, and all levels of football now use many of the protocols and best practices that have come out of the Corey Stringer Institute. We'll end this with a quote from Corey's brother, Kevin. Quote, "Anytime there is a major change in how society does things, it's typically because somebody died or got hurt in some way, shape, or form. I guess Corey's death was my family's turn to pay that cost. It bothers me sometimes if I hear of somebody having a heart or a heat-related injury, but I know even if that happens, there is more awareness of what to do. It took a while to get there, but we did." End quote. It's a good reminder that most labor and safety laws and regulations were written in blood, something we often forget when they become inconvenient.
Yep.
But back to the Vikings as a team in 2001. I know the 2001 season wasn't great for them. They would go 11-5. Dante Culpepper, who is on that year's Madden cover, would get hit with the Madden curse and go down with a knee injury in week 12 and miss the rest of the year. Dennis Green would be fired before their last game of the year, and Mike Tice, their assistant head coach, would finish the last week as interim head coach. Chris Carter would retire after this season, being the Vikings' all-time leader in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. He actually, I think, came back the next year for half a season
for the Dolphins,
but then retired after that. But anyways, The next year, in 2002, Mike Tice would be hired as their actual head coach. But that year was pretty insignificant as they only won 6 games. So let's get to the 2003 season. And the next time we see the Vikings NFC Herschel Walker curse. The season all came down to the last game of the year. The Vikings were 9-6, and if they could just beat the 3-12 Cardinals, they would win their division and stamp their ticket to the playoffs. The Vikings offense would struggle in this game, being held scoreless in the first half, but in the second half, their offense woke up some, and with just under 7 minutes in the fourth quarter, they kicked a field goal to go up 17-6. Yeah.
Looking good.
Looking great. On the Cardinals' ensuing drive, they would make it all the way down to the Vikings' 2-yard line, but were faced with a 4th and 1. Cardinals quarterback Josh McCown would take the snap, almost trip over his own lineman, and toss a 2-yard touchdown pass right before getting blown up by a defender. The Cardinals would then go for 2 and fail, making it 17-12, but they would not fail their onside kick attempt. Cardinals would take control at their own 30-yard line with 1:54 left and 1 timeout. The Cardinals would push the ball all the way down to the Vikings' 6-yard line, and on 2nd down and goal to go, Josh McCown would take an 8-yard sack, and the Cardinals would have to take their final timeout. It was now 3rd and goal from the 14, and it would get worse. Josh McCown would get strip sacked on 3rd down here and lose another 14 yards. Remember, they had no timeouts. The Cardinals were able to recover the ball at the 28-yard line. And with no timeouts, they rushed back to the line of scrimmage where they got the snap off with 4 seconds left on the clock. McCown would take the snap, he'd step up in the pocket, scramble to his right, and hit wide receiver Nate Poole on the sideline of the end zone as time expired to win the game 18-17. This play, while infamous in Minnesota, is beloved in Green Bay. Not only do their fans love the quote from Vikings announcer Paul Allen at the end of that play,
"They're Minnesota Vikings crying on the field."
They were also celebrating in Lambeau as the Packers were about to beat the Broncos and just needed the Vikings to lose to hand them the division and send them to the playoffs. And of course, to make things sting a little more, the Nate Poole catch would not have been ruled a completion in today's NFL.
Not.
Yep. Once again, the push-out rule came into effect as Nate Poole only got 1 foot in bounds, but was ruled to have been pushed out of bounds. The push-out rule would be eliminated 5 years later in 2008.
You can't make that shit up.
It's horrible for him, man. The 3-12. Josh McCown.
I know,
led
dude.
Cardinals.
The Cardinals being what eliminates you.
In 2004, the Vikings would go 8-8, but it was good enough for a wild card spot that year. They would go to Lambeau for their first playoff game ever against the Packers. And they would beat the Packers. Yes. Woo! Dante Culpepper would throw 4 touchdowns in the first half alone, while Green Bay's quarterback Brett Favre threw 4 interceptions. The game was never in question as the Vikings would start the game up 14, take a 14-point lead to half, and win by 14.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. But there was a disturbing play in this game. Just you will not.
I think it is.
Oh, yes. It's just a horrifying. If you have small children watching, please avert their eyes, will you?
Touchdown.
Oh, Al Harris playing off, bit up on the route, and Randy Moss, without even really being able to run, as he shoots the moon to the fans here in Green Bay.
That is a disgusting act by Randy Moss, and it's unfortunate that we had that on our air live. That is disgusting by Randy Moss.
Disgusting.
Right? Yes. Oh, God. Yeah, just horrible.
Horrific.
Great call, Joe Buck.
God, thank you for saving America.
Seriously, wow. Now, the next week, they would go to Philly to play the Eagles in the divisional round of the playoffs, and not fare quite as well. This time, it was the Vikings who would find themselves down 14 early and at half, but only lose by 13.
They closed the gap.
They closed the gap at one point. After the season, Randy Moss would be traded to the Raiders, probably for that disgusting act.
Oh, it's for the better, because if I ever had to see that again,
I know. It's an act only fitting for the Raiders.
Yeah, honestly, the best punishment for something like that is to be shipped to the Raiders.
Is to be shipped to the Raiders, yes. Okay, and that's the 2004 Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah. Good.
Now we get to 2005, and boy, I've been waiting for this one. The Vikings would start out 1-3 before having an early Week 5 bye week. On this bye week, I guess what the Vikings players thought they needed to readjust and get the season back on track was to charter a couple boats on Lake Minnetonka and have a sex party. Cornerback Fred Smoot is seen as the figurehead of this party. Him and D-end Lance Johnson were the ones that rented the boat. Reports say there was anywhere between 17 to 30 Vikings players that attended this party.
It was a team building activity. Of course they had to have most of them there.
What team would not be able to build cohesiveness by having a sex party? I mean, the players you have sex with, I don't know how to finish that actually.
Yeah,
they do something together. I'll tell you that. Right. Okay. The story goes that around 9:20 p.m., many Vikings players were on their way to the lake for this party in a limousine bus. That's what I saw it called, a limousine bus. When some of them had to pee really badly. So they pulled off to the side of the road, where 7 Vikings players got out of the bus and started relieving themselves on someone's front yard. The owner of this house, Kathy Hugh, saw them doing this outside her window and yelled at them to stop, which I don't believe they did. It's kind of hard to stop.
I mean, once you've started, it's kind of in their defense. It's hard. It's painful to stop.
Yeah, you don't know.
No, ma'am, I will not do it again, though.
That's right. But they did finish up and leave, right? Yeah. Kathy then got in her car and drove in the direction she saw the bus take off in. She didn't have to drive long. About 30 seconds later, she would find the bus parked at Al and Alma's charter boat company right next to the lake. That's right, they were less than a minute away from their destination, but I guess just couldn't hold it and had to stop and take a piss in someone's front yard.
You gotta go.
That was my next line.
7 of them.
Yeah, I know, right? The bus driver is probably tired of hearing all these giant NFL players telling them that they need to fucking take a piss and to pull off on the side of the road. So, I get it. Okay. Kathy, the owner of the house, Kathy would then drive back to her home and freshly watered yard and call the cops. The cops would show up a little later as the boats were actually returning to shore. The boat captains decided to bring the boats back 45 minutes into what was supposed to be a 3.5-hour boat ride. A 3-hour tour. Okay, sorry. The boat captains did this because of the reports they were getting from the crew. Stephen Doyle, an attorney for this charter boat company, said that the boat's crew witnessed many sex acts take place, including, this is a quote, masturbation, oral sex, anal sex, man on man, woman on woman, toys, double penetration, middle of the floor, middle of the couches, middle of the room, end quote. The cleaning crew would find condoms, lube, and sex toys, wrappers just strewn about, just everywhere. There were reports of minors working on the boat, but Doyle, the attorney for the charter boat company, clarified that no minors were present, thank God.
Yeah, honestly, thank God on that.
There were also reports of drug use, although I couldn't find the details on it. Around 55 sex workers were not just hired for this party, but flown in from around the U.S.
Oh, so now we got sex trafficking.
It wasn't sex. They went there willingly. They did not try. These women went there, were paid. They went there willing. They did not force anything upon. I want to make that clear. These women were paid for their services. And agreed and consented from everything I saw to these services. Okay. Yes. But they flew them in from New York, LA, Texas, Florida, and the city the Vikings had just played in the week before, Atlanta. Minneapolis, you really got to step up your sex worker game. Like, you got your guys.
None of them represented?
Not
a single one?
Yeah, they couldn't find enough sex workers or any in Minneapolis. I don't know. I don't get it.
I get going to Atlanta. I mean, you saw that the Atlanta Hawks are having a night where they honor the famous strip club.
And they did the reports that they went to a strip club. I didn't read which one in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be.
And even some in Florida the week before where they found some of these women to hire. Yeah, I don't know if they just called their buddies in New York, LA, and Texas, or if, some of them come from the. Anyways. All right. There were many charges filed on some of the Vikings players, but in the end, only Fred Smoot, left tackle Bryant McKinney, and running back Mo Williams were charged with a misdemeanor for disturbing the peace and had to pay a small fine in community service. Okay. Slap on the wrist for a sex party.
Magic City. That's the
Magic City.
That's the famous Atlanta strip club.
I have to imagine some of those sex workers came. Now,
the night when they honored that strip club was against the Magic too. So
I'm not just saying sex worker to be politically correct. These women, I believe, were a mix of strippers and prostitutes. From what they were doing, they were certainly prostitutes.
You do you.
You do you. Yeah.
You do you. No shame. No shame being thrown.
Strippers will even have their own line that they set. And, hey, man. The following week, the Vikings would lose to the Bears 28-3. But despite starting 1-4, they would win 8 of their next 11 games and somehow finish 9-7 with a winning record.
Somehow they team bonded.
They team bonded.
They bonded as a team during the bye week.
Hey, man.
Maybe they didn't pick the best activity to do, but they bonded.
It did. They did. It was not good enough for the playoffs, though, this year.
Yeah, I mean, maybe mini golf would have been better.
Yeah, something, dude. Anything.
There's the Mall of America right there. You could have gone to.
You can do a lot of things besides a sex party on Lake Minnetonka.
You could have gone to have a Juicy Lucy.
Dude, you could have.
There's a number of things to do in Minneapolis. I don't know all of them, but I know of 2.
It's a big city.
Yeah.
There's 2 of them actually out there, right? There's one right next to it that looks just the same. So okay. In week 8 of this year, Dante Culpepper would go down with another knee injury, this one being even more devastating. He tear his right ACL, MCL, and PCL.
And at the time, it's
pretty bad. And his season wasn't going well before this game, and it would also mark the end of his time with the Vikings. In the offseason, he'd be traded to the Dolphins, and head coach Mike Tice would also be fired. A big part being due to that Love Boat scandal.
Also, before you get too far, think about this. Had the Dolphins not acquired Dante Culpepper, they would have had Drew Brees. That's going to come in important. That's going to be an important. So the Vikings helped the Saints get
Drew Brees
by giving Dante Culpepper to the Vikings.
Dolphins chose Culpepper over Drew Brees.
Because they thought that knee injury he would come back from better than Brees came back from that shoulder injury. Because, and trust me, shoulder injuries, we know.
For quarterbacks, they can be pretty devastating.
Bad. I mean, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck.
Especially for an undersized QB.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, there is the 2005 Vikings with their Love Boat scandal. In 2006, Brad Childress would take over as head coach.
Good old Brad.
Good old Brad. The team wouldn't do that well this year as a whole, going 6-10, but the defense became the second ever not to allow a 1,000-yard rusher in a 16-game season.
Awesome.
In 2007, with their first pick in the draft, the Vikings would take running back Adrian Peterson. The team would go 8-8 and miss the playoffs that year, but Peterson was a bright spot, rushing for over 1,300 yards and winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. Right?
Monster.
Their run defense would again be the best in the league. The only issue was their pass defense was the worst in the league. The next year, in 2008, Adrian Peterson would have an even better year, leading the league in rushing with 1,760 yards. The team would improve to 10-6 and make the playoffs, but lose their only playoff game to the Eagles.
Go Birds.
26-14. Yeah, it wasn't. Which brings us to 2009. When the team felt what it needed to get to the Super Bowl was a great quarterback. They would go after Brett Favre. But on July 28th, Brett Favre said he would not be joining the Vikings. No worries, though. It's Brett Favre, a man who...
Don't take him at his
Yeah, a man who could never make up his mind about retiring and not exactly known for his honesty. On August 28th, he signed with the Vikings.
Absolutely seems about right.
They started out 6-0 before losing in Week 7. In Week 8, the Vikings would head to Green Bay for Favre's first return to Lambeau since leaving the Packers a couple years earlier. The Packers were 4-2, and the winner of this game would take possession of first place in the division. Now, they had played the Packers once already in Week 4 of this year, and Favre was great in that game. He had like 3 touchdowns, was named the NFC Offensive Player of the Week, and the Vikings won that 30-23. But in his return to Lambeau, he'd be welcomed back with a cacophony of boos. That would only fuel the old gunslinger. Number 4 would throw 4 touchdowns in this game, and the Vikings would win 38-24. The Vikings would finish this season 12-4, winning their division and taking second in the NFC. They would get the great fortune of playing the Cowboys in the divisional round. So, of course, they won.
Yeah.
If you've played the Cowboys in the divisional round since their, last Super Bowl, you're winning. And they won that game 34-3.
That checks, honestly. That makes sense.
The next week, the Vikings would go to New Orleans to play the Saints in the NFC Championship game. A game now referred to as the Bounty Gate game. Now, the game itself was a great one.
It was such a good game.
It's great. Each team going back and forth, scoring TDs until it was all tied up at 28 with 2 minutes left. The Vikings would drive the ball down to the Saints' 38-yard line, where they would be faced with a 3rd and 15. Now, they were like just within field goal range here. Even if they didn't get any yardage on that 3rd down play, it would still be like a 55-yard field goal.
Definitely
right?
makeable.
It's doable. It's not easy. It's tough, but it's doable.
You don't have to worry about any wind.
Right. So you're in a dome.
2 dome teams.
They just needed to gain maybe a little more yardage, make it easier for their kicker, right? Well, instead, Favre would take the snap, roll to his right, and throw what is now an infamous cross-body pass to the middle of the field, where Saints legend Tracy Porter would intercept the pass and take the game to overtime. Now, in overtime, the Saints almost turned the ball over twice. Once on a 4th and inches play, where they could have not only turned the ball over, but the Vikings could have stopped them. But the Vikings' curse is so much more powerful than that, and the Saints would end up kicking a 40-yard field goal to win the game and take them to their first Super Bowl and still their only Super Bowl appearance and win in franchise history for the Saints. Yeah.
But in that NFC Championship game, another thing that kind of goes with a trend that we saw from that great player they had taken a couple years before, Adrian Peterson.
Yeah.
This is 3rd year in the league.
Yeah.
He lost a fumble in that game.
He did, yeah.
Which is a trend that if you go the first 3 years of Adrian Peterson's career, he fumbled the ball a lot.
How many times?
He fumbled the ball 20 times in 3 years.
20 times. It's a lot of fumbles.
The most fumbles he had in a season at that point was his second year at 9.
Okay.
Now we go to 2009. He had 7 fumbles on the year.
Ooh.
He lost 6 of them. He lost 6 of those fumbles.
I mean, when he's that good.
I mean, so you look at the first 3 years, he had lost 13 fumbles.
Ugh.
That's just lost. So
that's just right.
That's a trend
fumbles,
that
13 of them lost, and he did one. He lost a fumble in that game.
He did, and then I mean, obviously, at the end of that season, that was a focal point for Adrian Peterson. That's something he worked on and he dedicated himself to make sure that later in his career, it didn't come back to bite him in the ass. We didn't want it to come back and bite him in the ass, and that's something we'll talk about maybe a little bit later. I don't know. I don't know if it'll come up later.
But we all know, later it would come out that the Saints were playing dirty this year, right? From
Sean Payton-led team?
From 2009 to 2011, the Saints ran an under-the-table incentive program that would pay players a bounty for injuring opposing players. A bounty program, if you will. The Vikings head coach Brad Childress claimed after this game that there were at least 13 times he thought the Saints were deliberately trying to hurt his players. Vikings owner Ziggy Wolf also complained to the league after the game, but it was years before anything was done about it. Favre was knocked out of the game when the Saints delivered a low blow to his knees, but he did return to the game. A week prior, the Saints had injured Cardinals quarterback Kurt Warner, but he too would return to the game, right? Many speculated that's why Kurt retired after the season, or at least partly that was the reason, but Kurt Warner would deny those claims. Saints defensive coordinator Greg Williams was suspended indefinitely, but reinstated a year later. And Saints head coach Sean fucking Payton would also be suspended for a year. What a douche.
What a fucking douche.
2010 would be a disastrous season all around for the Vikings. They would start the season 3-7 before firing Brad Childress and having Leslie Frazier take over as head coach. Favre's all-time record for consecutive games starting would come to an end when he was knocked out of a game in Week 13. He had started 321 consecutive games, 297 if you don't include playoffs. The next week would be the first game of his career he would miss since the 1992 season. 2010. It was also the week the Vikings were forced to play a home game at their division rivals' home stadium, the Lions Ford Field, because the Metrodome's roof collapsed. It collapsed because it couldn't handle the weight of a snowstorm that happened. So yeah, their like old
metaphorical almost.
Dude, yes, their old stadium was falling apart, just like their old quarterback. Yeah, Favre would start one more game in Week 15 where he would also be injured, and that was the last game of his career.
Here.
In 2011, they would be terrible. Right, the Vikings would go 3-13, but they would find their footing again in 2012. In this year, Adrian Peterson would rush for 2,097 yards, coming just 9 yards shy of the all-time rushing record.
That would have been so cool to see happen still.
When he won league MVP the last time a running back would do so, at least at the time of recording this. In the very last game of the regular season, Adrian Peterson ran for 199 yards to eclipse the 2,000-yard mark and helped the Vikings beat the Packers and give them a 10-6 record, which would clinch a wild card spot in the playoffs, where they would have to go to Lambeau to face the Packers the very next week again, right? For a second week in a row. And this week they wouldn't do as well as the week before, or the last time they played the Packers in the playoffs. They lost 24-10. Yeah. The next two seasons would be pretty unremarkable for the Vikings. They would have a losing record in each and not make the playoffs. They would fire Leslie Frazier after the 2013 season and hire Mike Zimmer as their head coach ahead of the 2014 season, as well as draft quarterback Teddy Bridgewater in the first round.
Teddy Two Gloves.
But again, that 2014 season didn't do that well. So let's go to 2015, shall we? The Vikings would get back to their winning ways. Again, beating the Packers in the very last game of the regular season. Yes. And this time it would not just lock a playoff spot up for them, but also the division and give them an 11-5 record. Yes. Vikings. Man, the next week in the wild card round, the playoffs, they would host the Seattle Seahawks, as well as their curse. It was
outdoor still.
Outdoor, yeah, yes. They're still building up their stadium. Okay, it was an incredibly defensive game. The Vikings made 3 field goals from that year's best kicker in the league, Blair Walsh.
Fantastic.
So that they could have a 9-0 lead going into the fourth quarter. The Seahawks, however, would score 10 unanswered points to take a 1-point lead. The Vikings would have an opportunity to win, getting the ball back with 1:42 left in the game and 2 timeouts. They marched down the field to get the ball all the way to Seattle's 10-yard line and set themselves up with a 27-yard field goal with only 26 seconds left on the clock and Seattle having no timeouts. The Vikings kicker, Blair Walsh, and he led the league this year and made field goals. He kicked game winners for them in weeks 8 and 9, and in this game so far had been 3 of 3 on field goal attempts, 2 of those from 40-plus yards out. So a 27-yard field goal should be nothing for him. It should be nothing for any NFL caliber kicker, right? Let alone the best one in the league. But I think you know where we're going with this.
Never even close.
Oh,
missed it off to the same way Gary Anderson missed it too.
But let's take a look at the replay of this game. It's very important to see this play up close.
Look at these laces one more time. Jeff Locke, the holder, is going to try and put it down, and bingo.
Ooh, laces were in.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Laces in.
Do you know what kind of started that comeback of the Seahawks?
What started that comeback for the Seahawks before they missed that field goal?
Well, it's something that somebody had really focused on correcting. And like, if you look at it after that playoff game, Adrian Peterson really did make a concerted effort to stop fumbling.
After the Saints playoff game?
After the Saints playoff game. You know, the following year in 2010, he had 1 fumble. Lost it, but only
nice.
1 fumble.
Okay, but that's great.
The following year, he only had 1 fumble. Did not lose it. They didn't lose that fumble. The next 2 years, he had 9 total fumbles, so a little bit worse.
That's not the worst.
I mean, he had 348 carries and then 279 carries, so he had a lot of touches.
A lot of touches. Only 9 fumbles.
But in 2015, it kind of showed its ugly head again, where he had 7 fumbles, lost 3 of them, and then also in that playoff game.
He
fumbled
to help Seattle come back.
To help Seattle on this comeback. So, like, yes, obviously Blair Walsh should have made that kick.
But laces in.
Laces in.
And anyone who's watched Ace Ventura knows that you want those laces out.
It was all that Dan Marino's fault. Everyone knows that. If he had held the ball laces out like you're supposed to, Ray would never have missed that kick. Dan Marino should die of gonorrhea and rot in hell.
That's just the thing. Your best player and one of the best running backs in NFL history fumbling like that in an important...
And then...
Twice.
The best kicker in the league.
Yeah. But that takes us... Just so you know, Adrian Peterson in his total career fumbled 49 times.
Jesus Christ.
Now, Adrian Peterson did not lose 49 fumbles.
No,
he lost 29 of them. They lost 29 of them, so they recovered 20 of his fumbles.
He had a lot of touches, though.
He had a shit ton of touches. In his career, I mean, he had 3,230 touches.
I mean,
you know what I'm saying? Like, so.
Times, and you only lose it 29 times to the other, you know. The laces, with Blair Walsh, the laces were in, right? And you want a smooth surface to kick that ball, right? Yeah. Those laces, while great for throwing the ball, unless you're Joe Cap, can completely screw up the trajectory of the ball when it's kicked. I know how to say trajectory sometimes. So I don't blame Blair Walsh or even the holder. I blame that damn Vikings curse.
Fucking curse, dude.
A couple other notable things about 2015 for the Vikings. It would be their last real season with Adrian Peterson. He would be on their team for 2016, but he'd suffer an injury in week 2. He'd only appear in 1 more game that year and only for 6 rushing attempts. Right? 2015 would also mark something of a trend for the Vikings that we're still seeing today. Since then, they have made the playoffs every other year. Almost. 2020 and 2021 are the only consecutive years where their playoff status remained the same. They missed the playoffs in those years. Yeah. But hopefully this means good news for them in 2026.
Yeah.
They're supposed to make it every other year.
Every other year.
Every other year. But we won't get too far ahead of ourselves. We've got the last decade of Vikings football to cover, and it actually has some historic moments that went their way.
I don't buy it.
I know. It's something that has not happened. All the historic moments go against them.
Everything goes against the Vikings, and you're telling me that something good happens for them?
Let's talk about it.
I'm excited.
Yes. Now, as I mentioned, their last decade, it's been a roller coaster ride for them, right? And since they made the playoffs in 2015, it means they'll miss them in 2016.
Logically.
2016 was also their first year of their new and current stadium, US Bank Stadium.
Beautiful stadium.
Beautiful, yes. Teddy Bridgewater also went down with a knee injury in that year, and then would be traded to the Eagles for Sam Bradford. Something I completely forgot about. I forgot that you guys had traded Sam Bradford to the Vikings.
I knew we traded him to the Vikings. I did know that, actually. Did you say that we traded for Teddy to the?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, I was like...
Teddy, they would trade the Eagles for Sam Bradford.
Because we had drafted Carson Wentz.
Teddy Bridgewater would go down with a knee injury that year, and the Vikings would trade the Eagles for Sam Bradford. And Sam Bradford would start a lot of games for him in 2016. They just wouldn't do that well. So let's go to 2017. Another great year for the Vikings, or as one can be for them.
Yeah.
Now, their original quarterback that year, Sam Bradford, with it being Sam Bradford, would get injured and miss most of the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's Sam Bradford in a nutshell.
Yeah, sorry, Sam.
He had good moments.
He did, they were just moments.
Yeah.
Case Keenum would be the starter for the most of that season, and it would be the best season of his career by far. By far. Good old Case. I do remember that year for Case Keenum,
he was so
for
good.
sure. The
good
Vikings.
Year for backups.
Great. Oh, yeah. 2017. What a year for backups, right?
I feel like I'm wearing the wrong hat for this.
You kind of, right? The Vikings would go 13-3 and win their division and be the 2 seed in the NFC that year. And in their first playoff game, they would host the Saints. Right.
Of course, the Sean Payton coach.
Seeing the Saints for the first time since that bitter Bounty Gate playoff game. But it was the revenge game of all revenge games. One the Vikings fans will never forget, and for good reason, actually. Right?
Football fans should never forget.
Right. I don't think they will. I don't think they will.
Game.
Dude, the game, it was a roller coaster ride. We're talking 4 lead changes in the last 3 minutes. And 3 of those in the last 90 seconds.
Because wasn't that game also like going into half a blowout? The Vikings were up fairly large.
The Vikings would go up 17-0 to start and even take a 17-7 lead into the fourth quarter. But the Saints would go on a 14-3 run of their own and take a 21-20 lead with 3 minutes left in the game. The Vikings would respond, and their kicker, Kai Forbath, would nail a 53-yard kick to take back the lead 23-21 with just a minute 29 left to go. Why is it we only remember the kickers that miss? Kai Forbath?
A lot of my memories of him are mainly with the Texans too.
Right.
I mean, I don't think of him with the Vikings.
With the Vikings, no.
No.
The Saints would respond, and their kicker would hit a 43-yard field goal to give them a 24-23 lead and seemingly put the game away with only 25 seconds left. The Saints' class act of a head coach, Sean Payton, would mock the Saints fans by imitating the skull chant at them.
Vikings fan. He's such a douche.
What a douche, Sean Payton. On the Vikings' ensuing drive, though, they would find themselves at their own 39-yard line with 3rd and 10 and 10 seconds remaining. That's when the beautiful hand of karma reached out from the football ether and slapped Sean Payton in his fucking face. The Vikings would run Buffalo right, key left, 7 heaven, or as we simply call it now, the Minneapolis Miracle.
Show me this great play.
All right.
I love this play. This is probably one of my favorite plays in NFL history, to be honest.
It's so good.
Steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
That's a great call, too. I mean, I hate Joe Buck.
Great call.
Perfectly done. Like,
I know.
Romo would have ruined that call.
Sideline. Touch. Yeah, it's...
Romo would have been...
Saints defender, safety Marcus Williams, right? Would whiff on the tackle as Diggs went up to catch the ball. And Williams would end up tackling his own teammate, simultaneously to take out the only 2 defenders near Diggs, who was able to turn upfield and go another 34 yards for that game-winning touchdown as time expired. It's the greatest play in Vikings history. Perhaps even the greatest game given the circumstances with how everything went, right? Although there will be another game that rivals it for the Vikings. But this play also led to a rule change, where if the game ends on a touchdown, you no longer have to do the point after attempt if it can in no way change the outcome of the game.
Love that. Love that.
Yes.
I mean, we've seen so many awkward moments dating back. I mean, like,
yes, I don't. Yeah, that's
that kickoff.
Great that they did not. Yeah, but at this point, right after the game, all the Saints players went to the locker room, and only 8 of them came back out for what was then a pointless but mandatory point after attempt. Only 3 of those Saints players were defenders, by the way.
Yeah.
But Case Keenum would just kneel down on the 2-point conversion to end the game. Yeah, be a gentleman. The luck, it wouldn't last long for the Vikings, though. They would lose to the eventual Super Bowl champions, Philadelphia Eagles, in the NFC Championship game, 38-7.
Also led by a backup quarterback.
Who
was traded by the Eagles for Sam Bradford, who then they traded to the Vikings. Who got hurt, so Case Keenum came in, and they re-signed Nick Foles as the backup, so it's just this full circle little thing. Like,
keeps going full circle for like everything.
It always is cyclical for them.
I know, man.
Poor guys.
The Vikings, they're their own worst enemies.
They really are.
2018, the Vikings would acquire quarterback Kirk Cousins.
Good pickup.
Yeah, he'd be their starting quarterback for the next 6 seasons. But they just had a good year in 2017, so they need a bad one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
They brought on the king of 8-8.
They did. They would go 8-7-1.
And not 8-8.
Not 8-8 from Captain 8-8. Not 8. Half a game better.
Bucking that trend, baby.
That's right. But they would miss the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, of course. They just made it.
So let's go to 2019. Right? Yeah.
Betting on a playoff appearance.
Yes. They would go 10-6 and be back in the playoffs as a wild card team. And who would they be playing in these playoffs? The New Orleans Saints. That's right. And although it wouldn't be, quite the miraculous ending that the last playoff game had, it was still a great one. The Vikings would be up 20-10 going into the 4th quarter, but what do you know? Those pesky Saints just wouldn't go away, and they scored 10 unanswered points in that 4th quarter to tie the game and take it to overtime. The Vikings would get the ball first, and with the help of a 43-yard pass to Adam Thielen, the Vikings would get down to the Saints' 4-yard line, where Kirk Cousins would then find tight end Kyle Rudolph in the end zone for a game-winning touchdown. Vikings win 26-20. Perhaps the Saints now have a Vikings curse on them from the Bounty Gate game.
Gotta hope. One can only hope.
Maybe that's how the Vikings break their NFC curse, is that they play the Saints in the NFC Championship game, and we see which curse is more powerful.
I'm here for it.
Yes, dude. I would love to see that. That would, of course, require the Saints getting to the NFC Championship game. Yeah, that curse might not be going anywhere for a while. Yeah, the Vikings would lose the next week in the playoffs. But hey, they beat the Saints in the playoffs, and that's what really matters.
At this point, that's all that fucking matters.
That's all that matters. That's right. And then, as I already mentioned, in 2020 and 2021, they would miss the playoffs in each of those years. They would fall a game shy of 500 in each season. And after those 2 seasons of missing the playoffs and falling just shy of 500, they would fire Mike Zimmer as their head coach and hire Kevin O'Connell, big old KOC, who is still their current head coach at the time of this recording.
I like him. I think he's a good coach.
I think he's a good coach, too. I think he's great. In 2022, O'Connell's first year with the team, he would get them right back to the top of the NFC North. They would start the season 8-1 before finishing 13-4. And in week 15, we got another historic game that would go the Vikings' way. Down 33-0 against the Colts at halftime. You remember now. Yeah. The Vikings would pull off the greatest comeback in NFL history.
It's a good fucking game.
That's right. In the second half, and after punting on their opening drive, the Vikings would outscore the Colts 36-3, including a 22-0 fourth quarter. They would tie the game with just over 2 minutes left when Dalvin Cook would take a screen pass 46 yards to the house, and they would hit on the 2-point conversion, Kirk Cousins to TJ Hawkinson. In overtime, each team would actually get the ball but trade punts. On the Vikings' second possession of overtime, they were able to move the ball down the field to set up their kicker, Greg Joseph, with a 40-yard attempt. And because you probably don't recognize that kicker's name, he would nail the 40-yard field goal and help the Vikings complete the biggest comeback in NFL history. But the football gods, not wanting the Vikings to mistake their kindness with forgiveness, would ultimately remind the Vikings of their curse. Now, despite the Vikings going 13-4 this year, many people doubted them and their record. They had won 11 of their games by 1 score and were the first 12-win team in NFL history to have a negative point differential, or 12 wins or more.
Yeah.
They were 13-win team. Yeah. They had a negative 3-point differential in total. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, all 4 of their losses that year were by at least 11 points, including a 40-3 loss and a 41-17 loss.
Those are bad.
Those are pretty bad.
Yeah, those are pretty bad.
In their first playoff game, they would face the Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley-led New York Giants. And I think this is also the last time to date that we have seen the Vikings curse.
Yeah.
That is, if the moniker of the curse is losing, close playoff games or games that could get you into the playoffs in heartbreaking fashion. Now, the Giants did lead for most of the game, but it was always close. And in the fourth quarter, the Vikings would tie the game at 24-all. The Giants, however, responded on their ensuing drive, going 75 yards in 12 plays for a Saquon TD. The Vikings would have a chance to win this game, though. They would get the ball with just under 3 minutes left. They would take it to their own 48-yard line, but then be faced with a 4th and 8, where Kirk Cousins would throw a 3-yard pass to hit his tight end, who was immediately tackled.
Yeah.
And, this Vikings team, who had won 11 one-score games that year, right? All their losses had been by at least 11, right? They won 11. Yeah, this was the Vikings' only one-score loss of the season. Feels like there always has to be some irony.
Yeah, absolutely. You have the best kicker in the league twice, and you lose because you missed you miss a kick in those seasons.
Right, you're cursed against the AFL. You faced the AFL team for your first Super Bowl loss,
and then the one that took your place for your last Super Bowl loss. So of course, the year that you win all these one-score games, you're going to get kicked out of the playoffs by a one-score game.
Yes.
And in a year, also, let's not forget the year that you have a backup quarterback lead you to the NFC Championship game. A backup quarterback's going to knock you out of the NFC Championship game.
Yes.
So, it's all cyclical.
It's all, dude. And
there's always a coincidence with this team.
Always.
A curse.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Not
a coincidence.
Don't believe in coincidences, believe in curses. That's right.
Curses are real, not coincidences.
Of course. It was a playoff year for the Vikings, and what does this tell us about the next year in 2023?
They missed it.
Yeah, they went 7-10 and missed the playoffs. Kirk Cousins also ruptured his Achilles in week 8.
And he had a great year up to that point.
Yeah.
His best.
But it would be his last year with the Vikings as well. Yep. Now, of course, in 2024, the roller coaster Vikings would climb right back up that hill. They would have the second most regular season wins in team history, going 14-3. There were 17 games now, right? Since 2021 season, 17 games. So it was easier to get 14 wins, but it was still an impressive feat. But again, anytime something sounds like it should be good for the Vikings, it's going to end in ironic heartbreak.
Yeah, because going into the last game of the year, they were tied with the number 1 seed in the NFC.
The Lions.
The Lions.
Who are also at 14 wins.
14 wins.
You know this is going, right? The very last game of the year would decide first place, not just for the division, but the NFC.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yes.
This is the difference between having a week off and playing the next week.
2 14-win teams playing each other the last week of the game to see who takes the 1 seed in the conference and gets a bye week the next week to start the playoffs, while the loser would drop all the way to the 5th seed in the conference and have to go on the road to face the Rams the following week in the playoffs. The Vikings got absolutely crushed.
Of course.
They would lose 31-9. The next week in the wild card round of the playoffs against the Rams, they would get crushed almost just as bad, losing 27-9. Yeah, the 14 wins, as I mentioned, second best in their team's history.
Yeah.
As far as win total. Yeah, well, they were the first 14-win team not to win their division and to not make it past the wild card round of the playoffs.
Totally insane.
Oh, yeah. They were the least successful 14-win team ever. It's just so fucking
so fitting. So fitting.
So fitting for the Vikings. But we're going to rewind just a little to the start of that 2024 season, where the Vikings were needing a quarterback. They had just let Kirk Cousins go in free agency as he was getting older and just tore his Achilles. So with their first pick in the draft, they took a quarterback who had just come off winning the national championship in college. J.J. McCarthy, who would suffer a season-ending knee injury in preseason. So they turned to their backup, who they had also acquired in the offseason prior to that year, Sam Darnold. Now, while Sam Darnold did lead them to 14 wins that year, he spectacularly underperformed in the last game of the year. And while he wasn't terrible in their one playoff game, he also didn't do nearly enough to win or even make it competitive against the Rams.
I mean,
yes.
He looked scared that whole game. Pressure.
So the Vikings would move off Sam Darnold, hoping that their young quarterback in waiting, J.J. McCarthy, could do just as well.
They also moved off their backup, who they brought in mid-season at that point, and let him walk because
you don't need a backup if you got that.
You got a sure thing, and J.J. McCarthy took in the first round, so you don't need Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Oh my God. The quarterback who actually beat them in the playoffs the last time they were in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Before, because he had gotten cut from the Giants midseason.
Yeah. And then they picked up, man, I kind of forgot about that too. And then, of course, he'd have a pretty good season the next year. Of course, he hurt himself, Daniel Jones.
Yeah, but he...
Yeah. The next year in 2025, quarterback they just let go, Sam Darnold, would win a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, while the Vikings would go 9-8 and miss the playoffs, which actually wasn't bad after starting 4-8 for the Vikings. They won their last 5 games of the regular season in 2025.
Yeah.
Also brings us up to the current time.
Yeah.
Now, J.J. McCarthy, he had a lackluster season. And would
nice
battle,
way of saying it. That's a very nice way of saying it.
In 2025, he'd have a lackluster season. He'd also battle more injuries and miss 7 games. But he did go 6-4 in the 10 games he did play. In the first start of his career, he would overcome an 11-point fourth quarter deficit by throwing 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and on the road against the Bears, which earned him the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. He's the first quarterback to ever throw with 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter of their NFL debut.
Pretty great.
Something, right?
I give him that.
He was also the first Vikings quarterback to throw multiple touchdowns in their NFL debut since Fran Tarkenton, who also did it against the Bears.
Of course it was the Bears.
I think the most appropriate way to honor your memory today is to get blasted and watch the Vikings make the Bears their furry little bitches. Go Vikes!
Like I said, J.J. McCarthy did get injured in week 2 and would not come back until week 9. But in week 9, he would also account for 3 touchdowns and beat the Lions. But it's not so great for him after that. J.J. McCarthy would finish the season with 15 total touchdowns and 14 total turnovers.
Yeah.
But hey, he's only played in 10 games so far. It's only been 10 games. So we really don't know anything about him. Let's all remember that we thought Sam Darnold was a big old bust after his first 3 years in the league with the Jets. Although it was the Jets. But hell, no one really believed in Darnold until his year with the Vikings, right? Like at all, they believed him. Even then, they doubted him. And his year with the Vikings was his 7th year in the league. So we do not know how J.J. McCarthy is going to turn out, even if it looks very bad for him.
Do you want to know how bad it does look for him right now?
How bad does it look for him?
So we're going to talk about EPA per dropback, which is expected points
the stat
added per dropback.
The stat nerds really love EPA.
Yes. So since 2000, there's been 852 quarterbacks who we're going to talk about.
Okay, who are in this stat.
Okay. JJ McCarthy ranks 851 out of 852.
Jesus. Okay.
You want to know who 852 is? You're right. It is the biggest bust in NFL history, Jamarcus Russell. So yes, you are right. We don't know what JJ McCarthy will become. We do not know. It's very early in his career.
Yeah.
But this deck looks stacked against him.
You don't want to be compared to Jamarcus Russell.
Especially when you compare him to his own draft class.
Yeah.
Where you had last year Jaden Daniels reach.
Everybody in his own draft class has had some playoff success.
Has had a playoff win at least, and 3 of them have made it to the conference championships.
Jesus, they really have. Yeah.
So,
May, Bo Nix, and
Jaden Daniels. And Caleb Williams looked really good in the playoffs.
Yes. And what I can say for Vikings fans going forward, or at least into next year, is that if the roller coaster ride continues for the Vikings, they're going to be right back on top of that hill for 2026. So, it will probably end in heartbreak because they are cursed. And because the Minnesota Vikings are the most heartbreaking team of all time. If I haven't convinced you of that by now, with the many stories of their heartbreaks, then we'll end this whole thing with some stats to back it up. Remember, you can't have heartbreak without the hope that a good team provides you. The Browns and Lions might be sadder. The Bills might even have more peak heartbreak, right?
4 in a row. That's peak.
Very peak. But no one has had the quantity of heartbreak that the Vikings have had. Since the 1970 merger, the Vikings are 3rd all-time in playoff appearances. Do you want to know the top 5 teams in playoff appearances?
Let's hear 'em.
Here are the top 5 teams in playoff appearances since the merger in order. The Steelers, the Cowboys, the Vikings, the 49ers, and the Patriots. What do those teams all have that the Vikings don't? Yeah, not just one Super Bowl, not just multiple Super Bowls, but they all have at least 5 Super Bowls and a dynasty to their name. Since the merger, they all have at least 5 Super Bowls in it. Yeah. This also means that since the merger, the Vikings lead the league in postseason losses. The top 12 teams in postseason losses since the merger are, of course, the Vikings at number 1, and you won't get to another team without a Super Bowl until the Bills at 12.
Oh, shit.
Oh
my gosh, yeah.
Teams 2 through 11 all have multiple Super Bowl wins.
Oh my God, yeah, they all do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. They have. Right. You would think playoff losses, bad. But no, your team has to be good to get to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And most of the teams that have gotten to the playoffs a bunch, of course, have a bunch of playoff losses, but they at least have some championships. But hey, let's forget since the merger, right? Let's go all time. And we're going to go all time playoff losses. And the Vikings are still at number 1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they have 32 playoff losses in their history. And some teams have been around decades longer than, including the entire rest of their division. Dude, hell, the entire rest, the Bears, the Packers, and the Lions are all older than the playoffs themselves in the NFL.
Yeah, you look at it and
Oh, yeah.
All of them,
you got
all the way down to 11.
You got the Vikings at 1, and you don't get to another team without a Super Bowl win or even multiple Super Bowl wins until the Bills and Titans at 11.
13.
Who are tied.
Oh, yeah, because they're
all tied.
I see that. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
The one heartbreaking stat that the Bills might have over the Vikings, besides losing 4 Super Bowls in a row, is that the Bills have the most postseason wins without a Super Bowl. But it's only by one game, and it just happened last season. The Bills literally just took that stat over from the Vikings. So the Vikings had it, and it's by one. The most postseason wins all time, the Vikings and Bills, they're 14 and 15, respectively.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like you said, every team before them.
Every team before them, and even the three teams behind them have, guessed it, multiple Super Bowl wins.
Only one team on there doesn't have, other than them and the Bills, don't have a Super Bowl.
Them and the Bills, and then you have to get to the Titans at 20.
Yeah, that's fine.
There's just not another team that has gone through the sheer amount of heartbreak as the Minnesota Vikings. So if you're not a fan of a rival NFC North team, or the Saints, the next time you are watching the Vikings, especially in the postseason, and it's not your team playing them, cheer for the Vikings.
Fans need it.
Cheer for their fans for once to not have their hearts broken as they have more than any other fan base in NFL history. But hey, let me know if you disagree or if I missed anything that I should have included, because there are a shocking amount of things that I had to leave out from their history. Also, give it a like and a subscribe if you're so inclined. Thank you for watching this one, and at least I'll see you in the next one.